This is the Hagmann and Hagmann report for today. It is Monday, June 8th, 2015. This is a live broadcast. We're coming to you live from the studios of the Hagmann and Hagmann report here in Northwest Pennsylvania. I'm Doug Hagmann at the helm with fellow investigator, researcher, and most importantly, my son, Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann and Hagmann report. I'd like to consider ourselves America's premier father-son investigative reporting team. Our job is to bring you the news that propels the headlines, the news that is hidden behind this funhouse of smoke and mirrors in the carnival we call the corporate media. And we do the headline and news triage so you don't have to. We are able to talk with and find people who know the stories behind the stories and bring them to you so you can listen to them. And tonight is not going to be any exception. We want to thank all of the new and veteran listeners for checking in with us from all across the world. Thank you so much. For new listeners, we broadcast Monday through Friday, 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern Time. Our home base on the Internet, of course, is Hagmann and Hagmann.com. You've got to spell that all out. That's Hagmann, Hagmann, and Hagmann.com. That's our home base on the Internet. From there, you can access us live, as well as our past shows. Click on the RSS feed there, select that for now. All of our social networking sites, and most importantly, our original investigative reports. Tonight, we're going to be having a very special show, piercing some misinformation and disinformation and the war of information, I suppose. Our guests tonight are going to be James and Joanne Moriarty. They were business people. Well, they were doing business in Libya beginning in January of 2007. They were working in the oil industry, if you will. They're creators of a unique enzyme that rejuvenated oil wells and cleaned up sludge pits and pipelines and so on and so forth. In fact, they had a lot of business there in Libya from 2007 through 2011, about $5 billion worth of their product. And they were in Libya when everything happened. Everything bad happened. And they're here to tell their story, what they saw firsthand, and how it fits into the current day mess, the morass. And I'm sure this is going to be extremely informative. Folks, if you remember our coverage of Benghazi, what that was all about, what we're still researching, and, of course, the people who are trying to rewrite history. Yeah, that's true. Joe, it's great to see you. You're working hard in the studio today.
Yeah, glad to be here. This is going to be a fascinating show, as we are with Jim and Joanne Moriarty. Their website is LibyanWarTheTruth.com. Do we have both Jim and Joanne with us?
Yes, we're here.
All right, perfect. But by the way, folks, you can go to Hagmann.com. On the right-hand side, a direct link to James and Joanne's website, as well as a direct link to their About page, just on the right-hand side. So there you have it. But welcome, ma'am and sir. Welcome.
Thank you so much. It's an honor to be on your show. We've followed you for years. You all are great guys.
Well, thanks. We'll appreciate that. Well, we got a lot to talk about tonight. I've got to tell you, you apparently saw a lot of things that no one should really have to see. You experienced a lot of things that people normally don't experience. You've had some close calls. You're lucky to be alive, and you've got some interesting revelations to provide to our audience. Now, why don't we do this? Why don't we approach it as if no one knows who you are or what your story is? Let's start from the beginning. We've got the entire show that we can we'll devote to you, but. Why don't you go ahead and start? Tell us your story. Tell us who you are, and just kind of give us an outline of your background in Libya and all that.
Okay, let me first of all start off by telling you and your audience we were never activists. We were never anything but real strong business people. And fortunately, we have worldwide exclusive production and marketing rights on some phenomenal technology that rejuvenates oil wells and cleans up pipelines and sludge pits and chicken fat and all kinds of things. And we successfully rejuvenated over 7,000 oil wells worldwide, less than 100 failures, typically increased production 250% that last 3 years. And we did most of our business in the Pacific Rim and some in Indonesia, and we were looking for a new market. And, of course, the treaty was signed with Libya in 2006, and so we knew that they had no new technology in over 38 years, so they were a prime candidate for our kinds of modern technology. And so we tried to find ways into Libya. And Joanne had a long-time friend that was a member of the royal family in England, and he had known Gaddafi, and he tried to use his influence to see if he couldn't find us an agent there. And we went that route for some time and sent in samples and never had any response. And finally, they secured visas for us, and we actually landed in Libya first time January 1st, 2007. That was after the treaty had been signed in 2006. It was like stepping back 50 years or more. You know, those people were so eager to know about the outside world, and we really went in there for 5 days with an entourage of bodyguards. We had one at each corner, and we didn't know what to expect. We'd heard all these stories about Libya, you know, and after we got there, after 2 days, I sent the security force home. People were friendly. You could walk up and down the streets without any duress at all. We only saw 2 or 3 policemen in town. They only had a couple of stoplights. This is in Tripoli, a city of 2 million people, and very, very friendly. And when they saw that we were Americans, they would get a big smile. "Oh, you're Americans. We're so happy to see you. Can we help you? Do you like our country?" And I can tell you, in our international travels in the last 30 years, we haven't had anybody greet us anywhere like that. And so, you know, we were really surprised. We planned to be there 5 days. We had a big contract awaiting us in Kuwait. It was about $150 million of our product, and we really stopped to look at Libya for maybe sometime in the future. They asked us if we would stay over several weeks, because there were a lot of people in the government that wanted to talk to us to find out about business outside of Libya. And we agreed to stay over. We stayed over, I guess, an extra 10 or 11 days. And every night we met with a different minister, and they were interested in our technology, kind of, but they were wanting to know about business, about the United States, about the outside world, if you would. And before we left there, we actually signed a contract to treat or rejuvenate 2,500 of their monster wells. That would have been about $600 million to possibly as much as $1 billion of our product. Now, that's a home run in anybody's business, and to do it on the first trip into an unknown country is phenomenal. And so we were proactive to see whatever it took to do business in Libya, because we already had a home run there. And I've got to tell you what we found in Libya, and Joanne and I are first-hand eyewitnesses to Libya. We had been in Libya 17 times from January 2007 until February 2011. We were there never less than 30 days. Several trips we were there 90 days or longer. We travel all over the country. On subsequent trips, we signed more contracts to clean up these sludge lakes out in the middle of the desert, to do environmental remediation, clean up of diesel and diesel spills, and all kinds of business. And we ended up signing contracts totaling over $5 billion in the period from 2007 till 2011. That was just our product. And you add on top of that the infill service work, and it was the total amount of those contracts probably would have been $20 billion. So,
Jim, let me stop you right there. For the folks who are just joining us here, I want to reintroduce you. For the folks that are joining us late, we are talking with James and Joanne Moriarty. Their website is LibyanWarTheTruth.com. You got to scrunch it all together. LibyanWarTheTruth.com. You also have to know how to spell too. Okay, LibyanWarTheTruth.com. A little test on how to spell Libya. I know some of you out there. Okay, LibyanWarTheTruth.com, or simply go to Hagmann.com on the right-hand side. There's a link directly to their website. That's James and Joanne Moriarty, our special guest today, giving us the personal background story to Libya. I want to mention right now, folks, that tonight's broadcast, so proud to tell you that tonight's broadcast is sponsored by NatureBox. NatureBox ships great tasting and guilt-free snacks right to your door. They've got over 100 flavors to choose from. And man, Joe and I might have tried maybe 30 of them. And we're going for the record. But anyway, take your pick. Asiago and cheddar, cheese crisp, pistachio, power clusters, Big Island pineapple, my goodness, and my favorite, mini Belgian waffles. Folks, you'll never get bored of snacking again. Try NatureBox for free. That's right, for free. Go to naturebox.com/CFP-radio. That's naturebox.com/CFP-radio. Alternatively, you can go to Hagmann click on, scroll all the way down to the bottom and click on the NatureBox icon. It'll take you over there. But once again, we're speaking with James and Joanne Moriarty, LibyanWarTheTruth.com. So happy to have them with us. Jim, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I noticed that on our board here that we had just a ton of people joining us late, so I wanted to kind of make sure you had a good introduction as well. So go ahead, continue on, sir.
Thank you so much. Well, with that kind of business opportunity, anybody would be proactive to really investigate the laws there, find out what was required to do business there legitimately, and of course make sure all the pitfalls that occur when you're doing business outside the United States were covered. And the Libyan laws were really different from anything we had looked at before, and we don't do the in-field service work. We do a medical-grade DNA manipulation of microbes, and we produce custom enzymes that are designed for each well, for each cleanup. And we let the local companies do the big jobs, the in-field work, and they make most of the money from their in-field work, but we have to have the right partner. And so we were looking for the right Libyan partner, and, of course, those guys had been locked out of the Western world for so long, they were trepidatious about opening up to a new group. And, of course, we were looking cross-eyed trying to find the right partner. And so years went on. We finally got the corporations formed that made us really a legal entity in Libya. We were treated as though we were a Libyan entity, and we could receive payments directly from the government, et cetera. And so then we started the process of finding the location and the partner to build a large-scale enzyme production plant in Libya. It took us a long time to finally find the right partner, and we signed joint venture agreements the 1st of January 2011 with the Social Security Fund of John Zur. And that particular Social Security fund was the smallest in Libya, but it was worth $16 billion. And all the beneficiaries were the retirees from the oil and gas business in Libya, the National Oil Company, the oil field service companies, the oil producers, et cetera. So they were perfect partners for us because they could do all the interface locally. They could handle all the politicking, if you would, and we would concentrate on what we do, and that's make the magic in our factory and in our laboratories. And signed that 1st of January 2011. I then signed an agreement to locate that production plant in a new free zone that was being built near the Tunisian border. And I actually left there on the 8th of February, and the fighting started on the 18th of February. And it was an absolutely false flag operation. Libyan people were happy. And what I'd like to do now is I'd like to tell you all about Libya before NATO blew it up, because what we know to be true is different from what you've ever heard.
Okay. Yeah, fire away.
Hey, Charlie. But first of all, I'd like to say the women in Libya were emancipated in the 1970s by Gaddafi. He was totally against all radical Islam, and he didn't believe that women should wear burqas or anything. In fact, he didn't even particularly like the headscarf that Muslim women wear. But they were emancipated. Women were doctors and lawyers and teachers and homemakers and business entrepreneurs and whatever they wanted to be. In fact, the women were in the army there. And
they drove their own cars. They had their own offices. You know, they were as independent as any females anywhere on this earth.
It was the most progressive Muslim country in the world, and they allowed other religions there too. If your religion had a book, you were welcome there. There were Jewish people there. There were a lot of Catholics there. There were all kinds of religions there, and they were protected by the Libyan state. They were allowed to be there and have their churches and have their people there.
Our first trip in there, we met with the bishop. He was actually the prelate of the Catholic Church in Libya, and he'd been in Libya 30 years. And we met with him really to find out what Libya was like. And he said, well, I leave my church open. I leave my rectory open. He said, I'm protected by the government here. He said, I have absolutely no problem. And he said, there's a lot of Filipino doctors and nurses and everybody there, mostly Catholic. And he said, so I have a fairly large congregation. He said, I'm protected by this government. Not what we'd heard.
Now, the other thing in Libya that it's a totally secure feeling. There was no feeling of trepidation when you went outside. Nobody bothered anybody. Libyans had all utilities paid for them. They did not pay electricity or gas or any other utility. The government gave housing to them. If they was their first house, they were just getting married. How big were those condominiums?
Houses. Libya was building 620,000 new condominiums. They were at least 2,000 square feet, and you actually paid 10% of your salary for 20 years, and then the title was given to you freely. If you made $900 a month, you paid $90 a month for your house, and that was with all utilities. Gasoline was 44 cents a gallon. Your first car cost you half of dealer invoice. The day you got married, the government gave you a gift of $46,000
to start your life.
When you had a baby, the government gave you $5,000. If your education was fully paid to whatever extent your brain would support. And so if you were smart enough to go for a doctorate or a master's outside of Libya, the government paid not only your fees, tuition, books, and everything, but they paid a stipend for you to live on. We knew a young man that was married with 4 children getting his Ph.D. in England, and his stipend was 7,500 pounds a month.
No, $4,900.
Oh, you're right.
It was $7,500.
$7,500. That's right. And that was on top of all his fees, tuitions, books, etc. Medical paid anywhere in the world that you needed to go, and not only did they pay your medical expenses, they paid your travel expenses and travel expenses of a family member to go with you. Nobody had any debt. If you were a bad businessman and you lost your money for whatever reason, there were food storehouses all over the country, and without any requirement of ID or anything, you could go to one of those storehouses, tell them you needed food for your family. They would give you 50 kilos of rice, 50 kilos of flour, I think it was 20 kilos of cheese, 20 kilos of powdered milk, and enough money to buy an animal to have it slaughtered for your family. And if you had to go back next week and do it again, then it was done again. At their Ramadan, which was like Christmas, there was a gift given to every man, woman, and child in Libya. They could go into any bank and receive a cash gift from the government. So, you know, the part about the emancipation of women and Gaddafi never allowed the part of the Quran, which was added by the Ayatollah Khomeini, to be taught in Libya. And he said that's not part of our religion. It's not going to be in this country. For that reason, the Muslim world put a fatwa out on him to have him killed. You know,
radical Muslim.
Have him killed. That fatwa remained in place for 20 years. Now, this is not the Libya that we heard about, but this is the Libya we saw. And we also did not see any military around any place. Now, they had military camps and everything, but I want you all to appreciate the fact that the treaty was signed in 2006 required that Gaddafi first step down from power. Second, he had to reduce his military by 50% and had to get rid of all of his nuclear capabilities, which he agreed to do. And incidentally, Chris Stevens was in the NATO force that went in there to see the dismantling of the nuclear system. So Chris Stevens was introduced into Libya way back in 2006. Gaddafi got rid of half his army. He stepped down out of power, and the guy that was elected was a guy named Baghdadi. He was actually the leader of Libya from 2006 on.
Prime Minister.
Then in 2009, there was another treaty that was signed. McCain and that bunch of criminals went in there, and Gaddafi was required to reduce his military by another 50% to get rid of all of his offensive weapons. And the only requirement that Libya had was that the United States defended Libya in the event of an attack or an invasion. You can see how Libya was set up to be invaded by the United States beginning with the Treaty of 2006. We didn't know that. The Libyans definitely didn't know that. But they were really neutered before this fighting ever started. And the Libyans, about 85% of the Libyans like their government. There was a radical bunch out in the Derna area. They were radical. Yeah, Benghazi and Derna. They'd always been radical. They still are radical. Those are the ones that the U.S. exploited and brought into Al-Qaeda and trained them for activities all over the world. And that was the group that was the core that the CIA and the U.S. used to try to cause the uprising in Libya. There were still not any people, not enough Libyans that would agree to fight. So the U.S. brought in mercenaries, 250,000 mercenaries, well-equipped, well-trained, directed, and managed by the CIA military division. And those were the people that were fighting in Libya, not the Libyans. And the no-fly zone was set up without any validation of the crimes that supposedly had been committed. And by charter, any UN or NATO member must have the right of
fact-finding commission.
Yeah, and that has to be at least 2 fact-finding commissions into the country to verify that these crimes have been committed. That never happened. Libya requested it many times. Not only did Libya request it, but so did the Pope. The Pope, on 3 different occasions, volunteered to act as a peace mediator. The Pope, Bishop Cardinelli, Turkson, and one Monsignor would act as the group that would mediate between the radicals, if you would, in the Libyan government. His requests were never even responded to. The request for fact-finding was never responded to at all. They just started attacking Libya. And when the no-fly zone was established, it was established under the auspices to protect the civilians, and that was established after 2.5 days. And the U.S. pilots that set up that no-fly zone blew up all the defensive equipment, said that they were so effective in their bombings that Libya could not have gotten a mosquito in the air. Yet the bombing continued because the people of Libya were not in the fight. And the United States, UN, and NATO committed 60,000 bombing sorties into Libya, several hundred rockets or bombs on each one. And that number of sorties is more bombing sorties than were completed in World War II totally. So they bombed this country to oblivion using depleted uranium, warheads, etc. They used fuel-air explosive, the poor man's nuclear bomb on Sirte and Beni Walid, the places that would just not give up at all. And that's a 2-part bomb. It's a real nasty bomb. The first part of the bomb explodes, and it's phosphor, and when it's dispersed out over a large area, the second explosion takes place and ignites the phosphor. It burns at 6,000 degrees. It increases atmospheric pressure 20 times. It burns at such a high temperature and soaks up all the oxygen. destroys the buildings. Anything alive below it is ruined, burned, crushed, etc. And we were there when that bombing took place.
But it should be talked about why this happened.
Yes, yes.
First of all, I'd like to say a little bit of the history of Libya. In 1969, when the old despot king who was appointed by the UK was just a puppet, there was never a king in Libya. The average Libyan made about 60 dinar a year, and they were just basically slaves for the Italians that occupied that country and the oil magnates that were there. When there was their bloodless coup, there were 12 or 11 tribes actually that got together and their military heads. When the old king heard about the coup, he just ran off. So it was a completely bloodless coup. Gaddafi was appointed by these 12 tribes to be the head. From 1969 until 2011, when NATO took it over, Libya went from the poorest country in Africa to the most developed country in Africa, to the highest paid wage.
$15,700 a year average salary. That's higher than India, higher than China. It was the highest in Africa. And, with no debt and all things paid, people could live in Libya very, very well. Nobody had any debt.
Besides that, in 1969, Libyans were not, up to that point, Libyans had never owned any of their own land. Libya had been occupied for 8,000 years almost. I mean, there'd been the Ottoman Empire, the Romans, the Greeks, all of them went through Libya and occupied it. Well, when Gaddafi, or when the bloodless coup took place, Gaddafi actually stepped up, and every man, woman, and child that had been working land for the Italians, that land became theirs. First time in their history they owned their own land. So you have to understand, Gaddafi wasn't perfect by any means, but there was a reason for the Libyan people to love him. He took care of them. He was their spiritual leader during the war. He wasn't a leader of the country. All that you heard in the news about him being a leader and it was his army and all this, he wasn't in charge of anything. So that was all hyped by the media. Now, you go on and tell them the reason for the war.
The reason for the war, there's several. First of all, Libya was the strongest country in Africa. Second strongest was South Africa. The United States is bound and determined to have a war with China, and they wanted to keep China away from the mineral resources in Africa. So the United States formed AFRICOM, which is the U.S. military control of Africa. Libya said not only no, but hell no. South Africa, 6 other countries besides those 2 would not agree to become part of AFRICOM. So the U.S. wanted to take Gaddafi out so that they could make AFRICOM a reality. Second, the Lockerbie explosion, that airplane, Libya had nothing to do with it, and that's been proven by whistleblowers from the CIA and other defense agencies. Susan Lindauer was a backdoor agent. She's written a book about that, and Gaddafi agreed to take the blame for that. The only way that they would allow him to come back into the international community and buy goods and have upgraded service for his people. You've got to realize that Libya's oil production prior to the embargo was 3,700,000 barrels of oil a day, and they produced the equivalent dollar volume in gas as well. Well, when we went in there, their production was down to less than 1 million barrels a day. So it was a huge economic requirement for Libya to be able to do business internationally. And the payoff or the bribe was for Libya to buy back in, was to admit that they did Lockerbie, pay everybody a bunch of money. But the proof is that was a rogue CIA operation that had to do with drugs in Afghanistan, and the report was on that plane. And Gaddafi didn't support terrorism at all. In fact, he wouldn't allow it. Anybody had a long beard and a mustache couldn't hardly get a job in Libya, and definitely were not allowed to move up the ladder. So he didn't like radical Islamists at all. They're the ones that gave him all the trouble. But this Lockerbie deal, you can research.
Let me ask this. Subsequent to 2001, the attacks on 2001, our intelligence sources had told us that Gaddafi and even his son Zayed were working with U.S. intelligence agencies to turn over al-Qaeda terrorists to the Western intelligence world. Is that true?
You're exactly right. In fact, first week of February 2011, Gaddafi and Libya were given an award by the U.S. Department of Defense as the greatest ally the U.S. had in the war against terrorism. February 2011. 2 weeks later, he was the sorriest guy that ever drew a breath. The third thing, and this is really the reason, this is where the power comes to play. Gaddafi could not stand the Zionist bankers at all. And so when we went into Libya, they didn't have any international banks. When we stayed longer, we needed to go to Western Union to bring in some more money because they, of course, didn't take credit cards or anything, and there were no bank wires. And we liked it for that reason. But Gaddafi had formed the African Bank. It was housed in the Comore Islands. All the Arab countries had signed up as members, and half of Africa had signed up. And the purpose of the African Bank was to make the gold-backed dinar the currency of the continent
of Africa.
Gaddafi
was a big African Union guy.
With all those natural resources, it was a reality. And, of course, the toilet paper bankers, the Zionist bankers, the Rothschilds and the Bilderbergs and the Rockefellers could not allow a real bank to be in competition with them. So, of course, they wanted to blow up Libya and destroy that bank. To let you know what kind of a prize Libya was, 6 million people. That's all the people Libya had, maybe 6.5 million. Libya had $241 billion in the Federal Reserve in cash and cash equivalents. They had 150 billion euros in Euroclear. They had $39 billion worth of cash in the country. They had 179 tons of gold, 2,000 tons of silver, lots and lots of tons of all the other rare earths, heavy earths, precious metals, etc. So, in effect, when they blew up Libya and went in there and robbed it blind, all the money that was in the Federal Reserve disappeared. All the money in Euroclear disappeared. Their cash disappeared. Their metal disappeared. So, in effect, the Zionists were able to blow up Libya with its own money and steal $500 billion or more on top of it. So it's a real nasty game that happened. And, you know, the thing that all the other countries of the world should have learned from this is if the big gorilla tells you you've got to get rid of your nuclear weapons, you better hang on to them because that means you're on their list to be blown up. And that happened. We were asked. Go ahead.
We know from our people inside and other people that we know in intelligence that in Libya that there was a meeting. I think it was probably in March, maybe April, when they had begun to really blow up Libya. I mean, they blew up hospitals, they blew up schools, they blew up hotels, they blew up roads, power plants, water supplies. They hit everything. There was a meeting with the Gaddafi, his family, and the U.S. intelligence, and I think UK intelligence, and maybe some other people were there. It was held in Jerba in Tunisia, a little island very close to the Libyan border. At that meeting, Gaddafi told them he would leave the country. They could have the oil, whatever they wanted, they could have. He would do whatever they wanted if they would just stop bombing his country and his people and killing them. And they told him in no uncertain terms, no, sir, you're not going to be allowed to leave. We're going to kill you. You're going to be dead. There's nothing you can do to stop it, and we're going to continue to bomb your country because we can. And there was a time when his son Saif came out during this time in March, April time, and he made a very angry statement on the news. A lot of people were angry. They said this made everybody look very bad. He said he was going to, every single rebel or person who went against their government is going to die. They're going to make sure they die. Well, this was because he just came out of this meeting. So there was nothing anybody could do to stop that. That was going to happen whether there were crimes committed, whether there weren't crimes committed or anything. They were going to take that country, fill it full of radical Islamists, and kill everybody they could and destroy as much as they could. That was the goal.
Now, all this is verifiable. We have been saying these things for years. And when we first started saying them, we were so out in right field that everybody thought we were crazy. But Dennis Kucinich, and you'll find that on our CD, Dennis Kucinich had a long interview that lasted probably 45 minutes or so, where he proved that the attack and the destruction of Libya was planned years in advance, and the war games that that concluded with the destruction of Libya were planned and committed in 2010, long time before the Arab Spring false flag ever started. And in the war games, there were to be 11 warships that went in the Mediterranean, and they were to establish a no-fly zone, and they were going to use mercenaries and radicals and everything from internal. And it was to start on March 17th. Well, it started on February 17th. But those war games were in place, years to develop, and they were in place and played in 2010. And that's a big interview with Dennis Kucinich. It's on our CD. All the other statements we make are so outlandish and everything, and it breaks our heart because it was our country that was the lead. And the reason our country is doing this is because the U.S. is nothing but puppets of the Zionists, and the Congress of the United States is owned 100% operated by those guys.
Okay,
and so
let's define some. If you don't mind, let's define some terms here. Okay, if that's all right with you. When you say Zionists, sure. Okay, people automatically gravitate toward, well, okay, we've got an indictment against the Jews. When you say Zionists, okay. So let's. Okay, why don't we clear that up so I don't get 1,000 emails saying, "Oh, you Jew hater," okay? Because I know what you mean. I know what you mean, and a lot of people will take this out of context. So let's just have a good definition of terminology here. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, let's back up. Let's call them then the Bilderbergs, Rothschilds, the banking cartel, the car giants, and they have hijacked the Jewish religion. Has nothing to do with the Jews. Has absolutely nothing to do with the Jews, and that's their front. But the things that they are the cabal bankers that own everything in the world. And if you look at the ownership of all the corporations worldwide and everything, you'll see that 85 persons own about 70% of everything in the world. Those are the bad guys, and they're the ones that take our goods and services and give us toilet paper in exchange. And so a gold-backed currency, a gold-backed bank with all the resources of Africa behind it would be a death knell for those cabal bankers. And what we see are illegal military actions that take place all the time. And you mentioned Benghazi. We knew Benghazi was going to happen 6 weeks ahead of time. We tried to tell everybody in the United States. Nobody wanted to hear about it. But I've jumped ahead. But
how did we get into Libya?
Let me go back to 2011. As soon as we got back, about a week later, they started fighting, and we're in touch with people in Libya every day. We made lots of friends, and we never ever did any business with the government of Libya, not with Gaddafi or any of his family or anybody. We really were doing business more with the tribes of Libya than anybody. And in Libya, it's a tribal community, has been for thousands of years, and about 98% of everybody in Libya are members of tribes. And they have their pure democratic structure. There's each tribe has its tribal leader, and then those tribal leaders are members of local councils, and then there's the country's divided into 4 parts: north, south, east, and west. There's 50 members in each one of those sections, and then that 200 is the general secretariat. Then there's 40 above those, and then there's 5 above those. And that's their structure.
That's the shadow government in Libya. Libya had 2 parts of their government. They have an elected parliament. They had an elected parliament from all over Libya, and then they had the tribal general secretariat, which was the shadow government. So there were 2 bodies in Libya that governed that country. Then you had your prime minister above that. So people don't understand that Libya actually had a form of democracy and a form of representation going very well in that country.
Okay.
And that entire structure was defined by a group of scholars during the fact-finding commission when we were asked in there in May. And they defined exactly how the government was set up and laid out, what position Gaddafi had in the government at that time, that he was really
an advisor.
And
he came only by invitation.
Mm-hmm. But as I said, when the country started blowing up, of course, we were more than concerned. We knew it could not be a Libyan event because the Libyan people, they had a good life. They're really
not
happy.
confrontational people at all.
And so we continued to try to find out if we could help bring peace to that country because of our business. Well, in April, we were asked if we would go into Libya to head an NGO fact-finding commission. We'd never done anything like that. We said, sure, if we can help, but we're hearing a lot of stories about what's going on in Libya. And I said, the only way we agree to go in there is if we had access to any part of Libya we wanted to go to. We could film, we could talk to whoever we wanted to. If that was agreed to, then we would do that. And they said, yes, absolutely. So first week of May 2011, Joanne and I went in there with a fact-finding commission that included people from Africa, from England, from Pakistan, all
France, Italy.
And we flew into Tunisia. You couldn't fly into Libya, of course. And then we took a bus from the border of Tunisia into Tripoli. And we actually ended up head of that NGO fact-finding commission. We ended up for all practical purposes, trapped in Tripoli for over 100 days because of the no-fly zone. They began to bomb the road between Tunisia and Tripoli, so you couldn't get out that way. You could not go east because, of course, that's where all the mercenaries were flowing in from Benghazi and Misrata.
Derna, yep, Misrata, yep.
Mm-hmm. We were all over that part of. Mm-hmm.
If you don't mind, Jim and Joanne, if we can just go back a little bit, because I think this is important. You had mentioned so much, and I think a little more history. I'd like to establish if this is possible, because a lot of people. In fact, before today, I didn't know much about the Italian influence in northern Africa, from 1927 through 1934. In preparation for our show tonight, I wasn't, I didn't know much about it. And of course, I knew, for example, that Gaddafi took over back in 1969. There was a coup d'état. Now, you mentioned a couple of things. Do you mind a little bit of question and answer right now?
Go ahead. Sure.
Okay. All right. It's my understanding, in research and prep for the show, that Gaddafi, as soon as he took over, or shortly after he took over in this military coup, and correct me if I'm wrong, too, because a lot of this information that's out there, open source, is not, it's not what it purports to be. It's not necessarily true. But right after he took over, he supposedly implemented Sharia law, and he was pretty. He set up a pretty extensive surveillance system. He was pretty tough, heavy-handed in Libya upon taking it over back in 1969. Is that true?
Not true. Not ever Sharia law, and something that we were told by a lot of qualified sources said that he was the CIA's guy.
Huh.
That coup d'etat was affected because the despot king, who may have been a nice guy, but we've heard he was a pedophile and everything. The oil industry was raping Libya. Libya was only getting a very small portion of the oil income. Plus, they were making these sludge pits out in the desert that you can see from satellites. They one of them is like 18 miles long, 2 or 3 miles wide. They have waves. And the biggest aquifer in the world runs underneath the Sahara Desert. And if you just dump all this oil out on the sand, it's going to leach through the sand down into that aquifer of fresh water and ruin it. So when the Libyans were trying to get the oil companies to have better stewardship over the natural resources, the oil companies really thumbed their nose at them, and no, they were pulling the money out. It was coming out easy. Let me give you another piece of information. A typical oil well in the state of Texas, and there's about 180,000 of them. The production zone is anywhere from 5 to 15 foot thick. In Libya, their small production zone is 600, and their big zone is 1,200 feet thick.
So they have huge wells.
So they have these monster wells. Plus, they've got the lightest oil in the world. They've got some oil that has an API of as high as 55. You can take it out of the ground, almost pour it into your crankcase.
It's called Bonnie Light.
Now, it does have a lot of paraffin in it, but it's extremely light oil. And some refineries in the world, namely in France and in Germany, can only process that oil because it has no sulfur or other contaminants or anything in it. So Libya is a real strong resource for Germany and France.
Gotcha.
And so they, of course, were on the bandwagon to help blow Libya up so they could get more oil and gas out of it. Now, go ahead with some more questions.
Well, yeah, and Joanne, I don't want to cut you off at all, but okay, going back to the Reagan era, for example. Well, even before that, we saw, and you'd mentioned this, oil. The country's income came from oil, and of course, we saw what happened in the 70s. Now, it's my understanding, or at least it's historically been reported, that a lot of the profits from Libya's oil production and exports went on to purchase arms and sponsoring of paramilitary terrorist organizations across the Middle East. Is that true?
Not at all. How would Libya have been the strongest ally with the United States against the fight in terrorism? How would that be?
Okay.
And the part about the terrorists being trained in Libya that bombed 9/11, that was never true. That was all false. But you need to appreciate the fact that the media is not telling the truth and never have. The Supreme Court finally declared them an entertainment entity because they're not required to tell the truth.
Well,
and
that's why we have you guys on, and that's why Jim and Joanne, we are so glad to have you on to tell the truth. I mean, you've been there, and as you, by your own admission, were 17 times in excess of. I mean, you've been there a lot. I mean, my goodness, as Westerners and as business people. So we need to set the record straight. One more question before we move on, and we go on here. The little kerfuffle, or more than a little kerfuffle, that took place back in 1986 with Reagan, when an airstrike, when a missile hit his tent, if you will. Yeah, his home. Killed his daughter. What was that about?
Well, it was another, the Libya was blamed for blowing up
the embassy in Germany.
Yeah, and for killing that policeman outside their embassy. And
those were CIA operations.
And there was a disco in England. All those were blamed on Libya, and the reason Libya is an easy target is because they're a closed shop. You can't get a visa to go. You could not get a visa to go into Libya. They were closed outsiders.
They didn't have a visa department.
They had been abused by every country that went in there and controlled Libya.
Exploited.
And so they were really a pure tribal culture. There were even when we were there was only about 300,000 foreigners a year into Libya, and most of those, 90% of them were oil field service people and executives in oil field production companies and things like that. But it was really easy to blame them for things because they never responded. And this frustrated us because during the war, when we were there, the reporters that were inside Libya were absolutely lying about what was going on. We heard them every night. They would go in and tell exactly the opposite of what happened. And we were so frustrated, and we told the Libyans, for goodness sakes, you all need to go out with a public relations campaign and show the world what's going on. And this is what they said. They said, the truth and our God will save us. Now, that's how faithful people they are.
They're very naive.
But, when you've got the big gorilla blowing you up, that many sorties, and the bombing didn't start in the daytime. It always started about 2 or 3 in the morning and ran all night. And they were dropping these bunker buster bombs, and nobody ever got any sleep. And the incidence of miscarriages and high blood pressure and diabetes and everything was 50 times greater than it had ever been before. And so, it was a psychological warfare. But, no country is allowed to blow up water treatment plants and power plants, et cetera, and we did that. We blew them up every day.
The other thing we did, or that was done to Tripoli, because Tripoli was a stronghold against the war, against NATO. Tripoli was the 2 million people. They were very happy with their government. There might have been 1 or 2%, but those people probably immediately left and went over to the east to join the rebels, the rats over there. But, they embargoed Tripoli. They embargoed it from food and medicine and water and fuel. That's illegal. You cannot do that in any situation. You can't do it to civilians. And they couldn't get food into Tripoli. They couldn't get fuel into Tripoli. The tribes went at one time to Algeria on a bus and bought fuel and had it shipped into Tripoli. And the NATO, they were UK guys from NATO, boarded the ship, hijacked it, and took it over to Benghazi for the rebels. Now, we know we were there when it happened. They also found shiploads of weapons being brought in. The Libyan Coast Guard caught the ship, and on it were some young men with a whole bunch of weapons, and NATO guys were on it, and those guys jumped off and immediately confessed, hey, we were bringing in these weapons for the U.S. and for...
Weapons made in the United States, the crates, new crates.
We have pictures of them.
U.S. weapons. Transshipped via the Turkey and transshipped via Emirates, etc. And
Qatar.
And, of course, the U.S., by our law, if there is any left here, cannot support any aggressive military action anywhere in the world.
The Libyans ask, how is this supporting children and protecting the innocent when you're bringing in shoulder-mounted rockets and weapons and ammunition and bombs? So how is this protecting anybody?
Here's something else. All the civilian cars were gasoline. The only vehicles that were diesel were military. They barricaded gasoline from entering the country. Who is that going to affect? Look at any war games, any acts of war, and you're not allowed to affect the civilian people. Blowing up in universities. One university was hit 3 times. Hospitals, clinics. We were in a hospital interviewing some wounded soldiers when they bombed it. Bombs and rockets landed within 300 feet of where we were standing. This was in a hospital. One leg of the hospital was hit.
They blew up everything. There was a children's center there in an ancient building that was a historical building, not too far from the hotel we were in, and they blew that up 30 minutes after the UN representative was there observing.
In the records room. In
the records room, observing that Libya had the best record in the world for child care, for child survival, for
prenatal, postnatal.
And it was also a building for rehab for people who were hurt or injured or people who had mental disabilities.
Missing limbs and things like that.
There's no reason to bomb that building. They just blew it up.
And that UN representative was there going through all the records. And, of course, all these records would have proven that Libya was really a first-class place. He left 30 minutes later, a bomb directed at that site blew the whole place up. And that was incidentally 2 blocks from our hotel. But we saw, and Joanne and I went out by ourselves, out in the netherworld of Libya, and we interviewed people that had been injured, and one young man had his throat slit, and part of this is on our video. And the news claimed that he was a rebel, and that his head was chopped off by Gaddafi's army. The truth was he was a soldier. He was captured by the rebels. They told him to put on civilian clothes, and then they cut off his head and blamed the army on it. And the truth was Al Jazeera and Al Arabiya TV was embedded with the rebels from day one. This happened on the first day of the fighting. And they were embedded with them, and the TV crews were telling the rebels what to do to stage these events. So did you get any truth out of Libya? Not ever. This was from day one.
There was one man who survived in this massacre that they blamed Gaddafi on. He was shot twice in the head, I think, and once in the shoulder, and someone saw him move and pulled him out, and he survived. And he's one of the people we interviewed, but he's absolute proof of how this was a false flag, how it was started. And also you should know that the rebels, what revolutionary knows how to open a central bank the first week that they start their revolution?
First time in history that any revolution, the first event was opening a central bank, and $1 billion was sent to that bank out of Saudi Arabia. Ended up $935 million arrived, and then that money disappeared almost immediately. But they were paying rebels, and they were bringing in mercenaries because the Libyan people would not fight each other. So they were bringing in mercenaries, several 100,000 constantly, paying them with money that they were taking out of Libyan banks and being brought in.
A lot of the people that we interviewed told us, or it was translated to us from a translator, that the person who had them or chopped them up or tortured them or whatever they did to them were not from Libya. They all had an accent. Some were from Afghanistan, some maybe from Egypt, some maybe from Sudan. They came in from all over the whole region. They were all radical Islamist mercenaries. They were brought in by the
Libyans, the young men that were kind of coerced into this. They were given drugs and alcohol first time in their lives, because you didn't see drugs and alcohol in Libya.
That's what the mosques were used for.
And they would go into mosques and they would get these young men drugged up and drunked up and let them rape all the women they wanted to. And then, of course, from that point on, they liked that debauchery, and those were the guys fighting. And many of the many of the Libyan families disavowed their young men from the families because of the activities they did.
While we were there. Oh, go ahead.
Well, Joanne, I'll direct this question to you. You saw, if I'm hearing you correctly, well, both of you, but Joanne, as a woman, your intuitiveness, I do respect women's intuition and their observations. This was an evolution. This was a process, wasn't it? Since you first stepped foot in Libya until you left Libya for the last time, am I hearing that you saw this process increase dramatically? In other words, this influx of terrorists, if you will, this debauchery, this orchestrated debauchery, this orchestrated takedown of society. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Absolutely. I have to tell you that I would have to guess that the war crimes and the crimes, the horrible crimes that we witnessed in Libya while we were there are beyond anything I could have ever imagined. It has to be beyond what Hitler did, because I never saw any. There were women, girls were taken off the streets, their clothes were taken from them, they were put into rape houses. A group of girls were taken from a house in Misrata and put into a rape house, and they were all raped. These were 14, 15-year-old girls, and then their breasts were cut off, and they put their breasts, wrote nasty names on the streets in Arabic with their breasts. One family went home and found their son chopped up in the refrigerator. You can't even imagine the horrific things that were done. I don't even know who thinks of these things.
Now, I've got to also tell you that the news was putting out the word that the Libyan soldiers were doing this. It was exactly the opposite. The Libyan soldiers did none of this.
We interviewed a lot of women. One young girl who was raped, she came all in black, because in the Muslim society to be raped is a horrible thing for a woman. And she didn't want her face known. She was crying. She was crying when we interviewed her. She came. She was very brave to come and talk to us. And she said, "I'm alive today because the Libyan army came to the rape house and carried me out in a blanket." She said, "That's the only reason I'm alive."
And this is when Hillary Clinton was trying to get troops on the ground, because they said the no-fly zone was not effective in protecting the innocents in Libya. Now, I've got to tell you that 600,000 men, women, and children in Libya were killed under the auspices of protecting the innocent.
There's 128 mass graves in Libya.
And they kill mostly blacks. They were committing genocide against blacks almost from day one. And the lighter colored skinned people would be shot in the head. The black guys would be chopped up.
Okay, now the offenders, the perpetrators. So what you're saying, the perpetrators here, you're talking about the conglomerate or the cabal of Western intelligence agencies, as well as NATO.
A lot of Blackwater in there. A lot of mercenaries, Blackwater. A lot of them everywhere. I have films of U.S. soldiers in there, talking in Misrata in English on the ground.
All right.
I have videos of those.
And
now,
Jim,
I'm not saying the U.S. soldiers did anything like that. That's not what I'm
They
saying.
were in there directing, but these horrendous crimes. The reason they do that is they try to demoralize the population to give up, and so they commit these kind of crimes. But that's been the history of all the conflicts that the United States has been involved in for the last 50 years, and we found this out after we got back here, if you would. But, the sad fact is that all these atrocities, these chopping the heads off and all this other stuff, these are staged events that are made to have the people give up or whatever they're trying to do. But they didn't care if they blew up Libya. The oil and gas will still be produced. If all the people are gone, that's okay.
That's even
but,
better
if you can imagine, right now in Libya, there's maybe 3 million people left in Libya. There's 2 million people in exile that cannot go back because they'll be killed if they are. The 600,000 or more killed, men, women, and children.
At least 5 cities were completely razed, because most of them were black cities.
Of the people who are in Libya, there's 2 million maybe in their home. There's another million homeless. There's really no food, water, clothing, medical, nothing. It's a complete mess. Libya's been turned over to Ansar al-Sharia, Muslim Brotherhood, Al-Qaeda, and now ISIS. And ISIS is flowing into Libya every day. Military supplies, weapons, more mercenaries coming in every day. The military supplies all have U.S. labels on them. And that's today. Wow. So Libya is still being attacked by this country.
Let me tell you something. We became very close with the tribes while we were there, because the tribes were holding big meetings all the time, and they were trying to figure out what they could do to stop this thing. And we were the only Americans that were there that were not reporters or were not in some form of media. We were there on a fact-finding commission, but we were not people who did this for a living. We weren't fact-finding people. We were just business people. And
we were on our own nickel, incidentally.
We were on TV all the time in Libya, because they put their tribal meetings on TV. And then we were on a very famous talk show a couple times where all 6 million people, Libyans, listened to the TV. And, of course, they asked us, what did we think? And I of course, said, I think the Libyan people have the right to choose whatever leader they want, that it's nobody else's business. And that apparently made us very popular with Libya. But
that also got us on Al-Qaeda's kill list.
Yeah, it got us on Al-Qaeda's kill list, too. So
that's interesting.
What happened to it's a long story. We were there a long time, and we met a lot of people, and we drove way out into different areas and interviewed people who had sons who were killed, and people who had lost their sons and just wanted to know where they were, and other people who were people in hospitals and different things. We have a lot of eyewitness activity over this time. And we knew all the reporters, a lot of them too, because they were all staying at the Rixos Hotel, and we spent a lot of time there. We knew all the media people. And we met quite a few ambassadors while we were there. We met the South American ambassador. We met the Russian ambassador. South African ambassador. The Russian ambassador called us one day and came and asked us if we would meet with him. He said, I'm a new ambassador from Russia. He said, they want to know what's happening in Libya, because what they hear on the ground is not making sense with what they hear in the media. And so I asked the government of Libya, their foreign minister, would he tell me what's really happening? And he said you should go talk to Jim and Joanne Moriarty. They will tell you the truth of what's happening in Libya. So he came and looked us up.
Now let me tell you how that happened. We'd been all over Libya for our business, and so we became friends, if you would, with the Libyan people, not the government, but the people. And so when we were there as heads of this fact-finding commission, we would go out to these people that we had met, that we knew, and ask them what was really going on. Are you being abused? Are your daughters being raped? Et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so we were all over the country. And just Joanne and myself and our driver would go out. The Libyans wouldn't even let me have a knife. I said, I'm a Texas man. Give me at least an AK-47. If I get stopped, I'm going to take some of them with me. No. If you get stopped by Al-Qaeda and you don't have any arms, maybe you'll live. But if you have arms, they'll for sure kill you. So we were never given any weapon at all. But we went out of Tripoli, would drive 2 or 3 hours, 4 hours in all different directions and interviewed people as this head of the fact-finding commission. And so people got to know that we were there. And the young men would go out and they would fight for 3 weeks, and then they'd come back and they'd have a week off. And while they were back, they would tell us what was going on. So we really had people in Libya telling us, pleading with us to tell the truth, to get their story out to the media. And we were trying to contact different media sources here in the United States. Susan Lindauer and Paul Craig Roberts and Hasseldine and a lot of guys we were sending information to, And we never published anything while we were there because that's not who we are. We're business people. We were a fish out of water. But we're truth finders. We do good business because we get to the truth of things. And so we had better information than almost anybody because the Libyan people trusted us. And so for that reason, we were given a certain amount of respect by the Libyan people that other folks didn't have. Now, the reason we went to these tribal meetings is Joanne and I had a huge amount of business. We wanted the country to stop fighting so we could get back and do our business. And so, yes, we were trying to get our business finished. But in that same vein, it became less business and more a matter of humanity and a matter of the truth and doing what was right to get the truth out to those people in Libya that were being blown up.
And, a lot of people talk to us and they say, well, are you a big Gaddafi supporter? Because there seems to be a faction out there that if you're a Gaddafi supporter, you're evil. If you're not a Gaddafi supporter, you're this or whatever. And both Jimmy and I never met Gaddafi. We don't know. We didn't know him. But I always say I met Gaddafi through the hearts and minds of his people because I went to some of those rallies. One of them had 2 million people at it in Tripoli. And those are the people that loved him, and that's how you met him. I didn't meet him personally, but those people had a genuine love for the man.
2 million people in the street one day. That's a hell of a crowd.
And that's not, excuse me, that's not out of fear. That's out of
No, I've got videos. We were actually went up into the control units where all the cameras were working and everything. No, people were happy. They were there in support of their government. They were dancing
and singing, and they knew us. When we went by, they put scarves on us and hugged us and stuff. But they were all. They had a saying what was it they said? Something Libya, Abaz. What they said in Arabic said, all we need is Libya and Muammar. Muammar, Libya, Abaz. That's what they said all the time. That was their chant.
Libya, our God. Libya, Gaddafi, our God, or something.
Yeah, they had three. Libya, our God, and Muammar. They said was what all they needed for their country. And there were people that didn't like him, but I would be shocked if any politician here would ever get 80% or 85% approval and call that someone who's disliked in the country.
That's true.
That's outrageous to say he was not liked. But the media gave all that 10% or whatever it was a huge voice.
They had a false, the green square, which was in the middle of Tripoli, it was a great big square that was about 4 square blocks. And that's where all the big rallies were held. That's where the big political speeches and everything were held. And anytime there was any rally, that square would be full of people, all of them in support of the government of Libya. There was exactly a mock-up of that square in Qatar. The news people told us that. And they would have rallies. They would film this green square in Qatar acting as if the rebels were out there controlling Green Square and they were all happy and everything. It was all made up. It was a complete false flag. It was.
Yeah. There were some media people there that were not part of the mainstream. That were some from South America, some from Russia and stuff that were trying to write the truth. They were completely hammered by the other media. They were beat up all the time. But one of these guys is the guy who told us that he said, I was in Qatar. The same thing is there exactly. When we were staying at the Corinthian near the end of the war, this is kind of a little sidebar, the South African ambassador, H.E. Dangor, who's the plenipotentiary ambassador for South Africa, he sat with us many times in that coffee shop because everybody had left Tripoli. People were scared. They knew that NATO was going to come attack, and so he didn't have any people at his
all his security left.
So he was in the hotel, and we asked him. He said, "Why did South Africa join this NATO thing against Libya?" Because South Africa and Libya had always been very close, supported each other. And he said, "Your Secretary of State showed up, Hillary Clinton, in our country and told us in no uncertain terms that if we did not join their fight against Libya, that we'd probably find some rebels in our backyard."
He said it was like the woman had a closet full of rebels she could drop down any place she wanted.
I said, she probably does.
Now, that was H.E. Dangor. Go call him and verify it. But I'll tell you, we heard exactly that same thing. We have a real close friend, 30-year long-time friend from Kuwait, who's a member of the royal family there. And in the early days, we're talking about February and March, I was trying to get the Kuwaitis to make a donation of $10 million to buy Jaws of Life and other saving equipment because Libya had none of it. And they actually would use ropes and manpower trying to lift these walls off of people that were caught in a bombed-out building. And I asked the Kuwaitis, I said, why don't you do the right thing, do the humanitarian thing, and buy about $10 million worth of this equipment. I've located a bunch in Germany, some in the United States, and sent it over there to save the lives of these innocent people. And so Sabih said, yes, I'll talk to my family and we'll see about that. Well, a few days later, I said, Sabih, what did you all decide? And he said, yes, we're going to do that. And he said, we actually upped the amount to $50 million. And I said, wonderful. I said, are you all going to source it from here? And he said, well, we actually called the Secretary of State's office to verify how we should do this. And they said, well, if you're so interested in helping Libya, then the first thing you need to do is join hands with us in attacking the government there. And second, you need to give this $50 million to Qatar because they're handling all humanitarian activities into Libya. And they said, well, that's really not what we want to do. And they said, either you do that or you may have rebels in your country. So Hillary Clinton told exactly the same story to South Africa and to Kuwait.
Is it a surprise that she blackmailed everybody? I mean, that doesn't surprise me at all.
No.
What happened to us?
Joanne, hold that thought. Hold that thought a moment. Jim, hold that thought.
Our top of the hour break. We're a little bit late for that. It'll be about a 5-minute break. So, folks, you're listening to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this Monday, June 8th, 2015. Our guests today are James and Joanne. And how do you say that last name correctly? Moriarty?
Moriarty, yeah, that's correct.
Moriarty. Jim and Joanne Moriarty. Their website, LibyanWarTheTruth.com. LibyanWarTheTruth.com. Go to their website and read some of their articles that they have. Listen to some of the radio interviews they've done. Number 2 of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this Monday, June 8, 2015. Our guests today are James and Joanne Moriarty. Their website, LibyanWarTheTruth.com. And when we took our break, you were talking about the tribes in Libya, how you have come to know many of the tribes in Libya. And I don't think you got to the point where we talked about last week that the Libyan tribes, you were one of the only people to befriend a lot of these tribes, and you were the only Americans that knew these people. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. Let me tell you what we were doing. At first, as I said, we were trying to salvage our business. We had a huge amount of business there. And with all the media going against Libya, we went to the tribal meetings because there was news coverage of every tribal meeting. And when we went to those meetings, the tribes always sat us up in the front row because, if you would, we were the only 2 white faces in the crowd. And so we were always shown on these tribal meetings. And the tribes asked us, why are you doing that? And I said, because I'm trying to let the world know that Joanne and I and other people in the world are trying to help you as a people. And so we're going to put our face out here in support of the Libyan people.
Also, the tribes weren't burned down. The Libyan government was absolutely being burned by the media every day.
So we elected to try to bring forward the shadow government in Libya, the legitimacy of the tribes, etc. And it was business motivated, but it became the impetus for the people of Libya. And so because of that, we went to these meetings, and they had meetings all the time. There were, 800, 900, 1,000 tribes in Libya. And they were having meetings all the time because they're trying to preserve their country, their sovereignty.
They have the youth tribes. They have all kinds of different sectors of the tribes too.
And so in that vein, we became known to more Libyans on a real personal basis, because they knew then that we were not trying to exploit them, that we were trying to help them. And there was lots of business offered us during that time. They needed gasoline, they needed medical supplies, and I said, we really are not interested in doing any business in Libya until the blood stops flowing in the streets. And so that endeared us more with them.
And then they adopted us into the biggest tribe in Libya.
Biggest tribe in Libya, the Warfala tribe, actually adopted us. First time ever that any Libyan tribe had adopted a foreign person or persons into the tribe, and that was a real high honor. And after we got out of Libya, they appointed us as their official spokesperson, because they were still not being heard outside of that. But this fact-finding commission was an eye-opener for us, because we were seeing, as I said, black and white. We were seeing the truth, and what we were seeing reported was exactly the opposite.
There was not supposed to be 2 American eyes on the ground there, I guarantee you. We were not supposed to be there. But near the end of when they came in and they blew up Tripoli, this is what I want to talk to you about, tell people about. We went over to the Radisson Blu Hotel, the Mahari they called it, and we met with the leader of all the tribes, Sheikh Ali Alahwell. And Sheikh Ali's a good friend of ours, and he was sitting with his translator and with another man. And while we were sitting there in the lobby talking to him, another man brought up a package and handed it to him. It was a manila folder type thing, big one. And he tapped on it. He said something to the man next to him. The translator said, "This is our constitution. It's finally finished." In May, all Libyan tribes came together 100% to make a new Libyan constitution, and this was rare. This hadn't happened in over 100-plus years.
First time that every tribe, 100% of all the tribes agreed
on something. So they had their new constitution was done. It wasn't 3 days after that they blew up Tripoli. And they couldn't have that. See, that would have stopped everything if a constitution came out, which they were demanding all this stuff for all the people in Libya because of the terrible
things. They were even giving positions to the rebels. Every man, woman, and child in Libya was going to have a vote. And so, of course, that couldn't happen. So within a couple of days, they attacked.
Yeah, they started bombing. I mean, they bombed 36, 48 hours straight. But then that was out in the distance and around the port. We heard it from our hotel. It shook 24/7. Then they started bringing in those black helicopters, and they just started mowing people down in the streets.
We were on the 21st floor of the Corinthia Hotel, and we looked out over the Mediterranean. And late in the evening, we could hear the helicopters before we saw them, and we could see 2 of them. We could hear at least one more. They were coming in low off the Mediterranean, flying directly into Tripoli with their mini cannons firing, and they were blasting everything on the street.
They killed 1,300 people in 1 hour, and 5,000 were wounded. That's how they took Tripoli.
Man, woman, and every man, woman, and child that was out was shot. And then immediately after that, these small trucks with anti-aircraft guns mounted in the
And the bearded Al-Qaeda on them, they just brought shipload after shipload of them into the port and unloaded them and just gave them the city.
Again, we could see that because we could see the port from our window. It was about 200 yards from our window.
They took over every hotel. They took people's homes. They broke into every shop. They raped women. They took all the cars. They broke into every car in everywhere because every car in our hotel was broken into. Our hotel was the only hotel that wasn't actually taken over by Al-Qaeda. And so there was a standoff at the Rixos Hotel. I don't know if you remember that. It was in the paper for 5 days. They wouldn't let people out of that hotel. When they finally got that done, all those people came over to our hotel. The Russian ambassador called us during this time, and he said the Malta Prime Minister is sending a rescue ship for all the dignitaries that are in Tripoli, and I'd like to put your name on that list. Would that be all right? He said, I know that your State Department's not going to do anything to help you. And I said, please do. And then during that time, we met a young man in the lobby who was the FIFA coach from Germany for the country of Libya. Tony Hay is his name, and he asked if he could come with us, so I had his name put on the list. And then the sister of the president of Mauritania asked to join us, Fatima too. She joined us, and then a Bahraini prince joined us, and then there was one other man from Texas that joined us. So that was our group that we were all going to go on this ship together.
To get out of Dodge, basically, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
to get out of Tripoli. Yeah, it was a mess there. It was scary.
It was supposed to be a humanitarian ship coming into Tripoli to evacuate all the remaining dignitaries and politicians, etc.
Now was this in February? Because what the trouble really started, according to the press, the trouble really started in February of 2011. Is that about right?
Yeah.
Or okay?
No. This is in August.
This is in August.
After we'd been there 100 days.
We went in May on our fact-finding commission, and we stayed in Tripoli until August. We were there 100 days.
This is about the 28th of August.
They bombed Tripoli the whole time we were there, but they didn't actually physically come in and destroy it like they did at the end and take it over and make everybody dead there. They didn't do that before.
And so we borrowed a van from the hotel. The hotel gave us a driver and a man to ride shotgun that would talk to all Al Qaeda and tell them that we were reporters. If they told them who we were, then we'd have been shot on sight. But anyhow, we were trying to find this rescue ship.
There were checkpoints about every
100 yards.
Yeah.
And you stop, and these bearded
You've seen
thugs,
them. They look like ice.
And they shoot their guns in the air. One time they shot down to the ground, a bullet ricocheted up and knocked out the back window of the van we were in. Bunch of hoodlums, And so we went as far as 42 miles east on the Coast Highway looking for this rescue ship. We're talking to the aide to the president of
Prime Minister of Malta.
Of Malta, yeah, and she was directing us, and we never could. We're looking for a rescue ship, and we're talking on a ship-to-shore. On a satellite phone, and back and forth, and every time we go back and forth, we're going through hundreds of these checkpoints, and we went into the port one time. They didn't know anything about it. We went back out, went all the way down. We went to a village at the very far end, and we were told that the ship was in a fishing village. And so we went into this village and asked them, and they said, "Oh yeah, follow us." And they took us in the streets kept narrowing, and finally we were in an alleyway that was so narrow that you couldn't open the doors on the van, and they take us up to a mosque. Now mosques is where all the dirty events took place. That's where they took the men and women in, and they raped the women, and they chopped up the men and boiled a bunch of them, and all the nasty activities they did were done in the mosques. So when they pulled up in front of this mosque, we knew we were finished. Luckily, these were good people, and they were trying to help us, and they gave us some fruit juice and some oranges to eat and everything, and they said they would direct us down to this fishing club where supposedly the boat was moored. So they took us down there. This was about an hour and a half later, took us down to this fishing club, and we're out on the ground, and we're trying to find the ship. And, of course, the woman in Malta forgot to tell us that it was really a couple of tugboats that were sitting there with their lights out because they didn't want to be fired on. And so we were then about 100 yards of them, and they didn't signal us, and we didn't signal them, because we didn't know what we were looking for.
The main ship did not come in because it had been fired on.
It was moored 3 miles out. So we went all the way back down. We went into the port a second time, and that time we were held in the port for about an hour. And in that time, we're standing outside our little van, and all of a sudden, these little trucks with 4 bearded guys in each one, 15, 20, 30, 40, 50 trucks with probably 100 guys, circled us, stuck their AK-47s in our face, and the leader of that group was a tall guy, real hard-looking man, and he said, I know who you are. He had a list with our names on it. He said, your game's up. We know who you are. And so they took us then to their torture center, which was the Mahari Hotel, a hotel we'd actually stayed in before, but it had been converted into their torture center. They put us in the lobby of that hotel. They were taking wounded soldiers up to the mezzanine, all the lights and electricity were out, but they had emergency electricity on the elevators, so they could take them up the elevator to the mezzanine, which of course was open. We could hear, we couldn't see, and these 4 men up there were making the most ungodly sounds you can ever imagine. And we were there. We were held there a long time. They took our passports. They interrogated us. They had different groups interrogate us. And then finally they took us back into the area that would have been the coffee shop, and they had a British film crew there filming us. And they were asking us questions. Had we been treated well? Had we been injured? Were we in good shape, And we didn't know why this film crew was doing that, but we all gave our speech and then went back out. And I kept demanding to get our passports back. And they finally were going to give our passports back, and we were going to go find the rescue ship. And then the driver from the hotel, a different man came over and said, "I'm going to drive the van down." This is several days later, a couple days later. So the guy comes over there, and he had been the IT man at the Corinthia. We'd known him, and his English was perfect, but he was always kind of standoffish. Turns out he was the rat or the rebel spy inside that hotel. And he came over there and he said he took Joanne to the side and he said, "I'm going to drive the van." Tell him what he told me.
He said, "This van is going back to the hotel first," and you heard that. Jimmy heard that, and he was upset. He said, "It's not going back to the hotel. It's going to go to the rescue ship. It's right down the road." And he took me aside and he said, "What your husband did not understand, that imam over there, the guy with the long white beard and that dash on," and he said what he didn't hear him say was that they set up a kill zone for you 2 blocks towards the ship. If you go towards the ship, when you hit that second block, you will be shot, killed, chopped up, and burned.
They're going to blame it on Gaddafi.
They're going to blame it on Gaddafi.
And Joanne said, "We better tell my husband because he's adamant to go to the ship." So he took me over the side and he said,
"Who set you up?"
Sir?
I mean, who set you up? Your name appeared on the list.
If you want to know, a guy named Franklin Lamb.
It's the guy who put our name on the list.
He's a U.S. citizen. He's a piece of garbage.
He's a spy.
He's a spy for whoever will pay him.
Spy is what he is.
And we found out who he was and put a sting on him ourselves.
And because we knew who he was bound and determined to have us killed.
You can still find him. Franklin Lamb is his name. He's an absolute piece of garbage. But
CIA or
our name.
I don't know who he works for. I think he's a freelance.
But he lives with.
But we know he has 2 passports because he showed them to us.
He lives with Hezbollah. He showed them by accident.
Yeah, he lives in Lebanon. He lives next to Hezbollah, the leader of Hezbollah.
All right.
And we'd help this man. He came into Libya without any money. We took him to the doctor. He had heart troubles. We loaned him money, and turns out he's a bad guy. But anyhow, when Ayman told me what our trouble was, I said, "What are we doing?" He says, "I think I can go by the back roads and get us back to the other hotel." That's the hotel we'd started at. And he said, "But, these guys are being killed. They're being paid. They get $2,500 to kill you and another $1,000 to chop you up and burn you. So you're going to have to pay them to get out." Well, of the 7 people in our group, I was the only one who had any money. I had $16,800 left. Huh? Maybe it was $19,000.
Yeah, hard to remember.
Anyhow, it was all the money I had left, and he said, "I'll go negotiate." And he did. He went down and negotiated with them. He said, "Now then, they will keep their mouth shut." And as far as all the leaders and everybody knows, because while we were in the torture center, they were parading in all the Al-Qaeda leaders and all the rebel leaders
to look at us. Because we were famous.
And then this big, tall, fat, bearded, bald imam so-and-so is the one that came in, looked down his nose at us, and sentenced us to be killed. So anyhow, after Ayman went and made the deal to get us free, they had gone through all our luggage. They had wiped the hard drive on our laptop. Joanne had secreted on her person a hard drive that had all a backup of all of our information, all our photos, all our videos and everything. And the thing about Al-Qaeda, they won't touch a woman unless they're going to kill you and rape you. And so they did not frisk her or anything. But when we got back in the van, then Ayman was good to his word. He took the back roads and drove us about 2 miles back to the first hotel. That's the first miracle. Because Al-Qaeda, if you look at them wrong, they kill you. So here's a man that was Al-Qaeda, and God touched his heart, and he said, the reason I'm helping you is because you all have been good people. We know you're just trying to help the Libyans, and so I'm going to try to help you. So that was the first miracle God delivered to us. The second one, when we got back to our hotel, we had slipped the news that night, but they were still looking for us. We were on their kill list. And so Fatima too, who was the sister of the president of Mauritania, was there. She speaks Spanish, and I do too, so we were able to communicate very well together. And she said, I know a man that is one of the directors of the immigrant rescue ship, the UN rescue ship that comes in here every day and takes people back to Benghazi. And she said, I've called him, and he's going to come and talk to us to see if he can get us on that ship. And I said, Benghazi, my gosh, that's the head of the snake. And she said, no, I've called friends there. They said, Benghazi's empty. Everybody's over in Tripoli killing everybody over there. There's not hardly anybody in Benghazi. And she said, but I think I can get him to put us on that ship. So he came over and he talked to us, real nice guy. And after he talked to us a while, he said, yes, I'm going to help you. He said, I will put you in my van. I will take you all the way through all the checkpoints in the port and get you on that ship. And then I'm going to make sure that when you get to Benghazi, they take you to the Tadisi Hotel rather than put you on the bus to take you to the border, because those refugee camps on the border, they will for sure have your names. And he said, so I'm going to do this. That was it, again, high risk to his person. He was good to his word. This was the second miracle. He got us on the ship, and we had two of the worst days you can imagine. The deep heat of the summer on the Mediterranean, no food, no water, 2 bathrooms for 300 people. The only thing they had was out-of-date fruit juice and moldy bread.
It was a car
and hot water. And if you drank the fruit juice, you were immediately doing the green apple quick step. And so the bathrooms were overloaded. People were sick, no air conditioning, not even any covers on the windows, so it was extremely hot. So we had 2 days of that. And when we arrived in Benghazi, all the other people on the ship, their luggage was thrown in the back of dump trucks. They were put on buses and driven 12 or 14 hours to the Egyptian border. We were taken to the hotel.
The UN blue shirt guys came and took us to the hotel. Yeah. But it was a good thing we got out, because they started firing their AK-47s inside the hotel lobby that same day.
Yeah.
They were chasing people around, and we were locked in our room. The hotel called us and said, there's an armed gunman on your floor. Don't open your door. So it was, it's like a Tom Clancy novel. It really is.
Yeah.
We saw a guy chopped up down on the beach.
Yeah, there was a guy outside our window. That's exactly right. It was the day before we got on the van to go try to find a rescue ship, and there were 2 soldiers that were fighting about 8 or 10 rebels. And the 2 soldiers had on soldiers' uniforms, and there was a small retaining wall in front of the old port. We're looking at the port that's 2,000 years old. It's really just some little jetties. And this one soldier jumps over this fence, and then he runs along the inside of this fence line down about 300 yards. And then the next thing we see him in, he stood up, he took off his soldier tunic, took off his pants, dropped this dasha to the ground, put a little white hat on, dropped his gun. He's walking out towards the Mediterranean, which had a little outcropping there, and he's walking there. When the rebels finally found him, they shot him. And then they ran over there and they started cutting him up. They cut his head off. They cut off one arm. We're up on the 21st floor. I'm filming all this. They cut off both arms, one leg. Their knife got dull and they couldn't chop the other leg off. And I'm filming this whole thing. This took probably 30 or 45 minutes, maybe an hour. And one of them saw me filming them, and he took a shot, and it would have been about probably 300 yards or something. The bullet went just beside my right ear, and the glass was, of course, double pane. The slug stopped it didn't break all the way through the second pane. But the next morning, there were 38 heads lined up above his. And Walter Fauntleroy, I don't know if you remember him or not, he was the first elected politician from Washington, D.C. He started the Black Caucus. He was the man that took over Martin Luther King's position after he was assassinated with the Southern
conference. Yeah.
Walter was in Libya, and after they'd had this long 7-day event in the Rexus Hotel, Walter actually had the rebels and the Libyan soldiers and the two sets of media, 40 bad guys and 7 good guys, had them on their knees for days and prayed them through this. Everybody's trying to kill each other. Walter saved the lives of all those people. He had them on their knees that many days until they all agreed to let everybody go. And so we didn't know this about him, but when they let everybody out of the Rexus Hotel, they came to our hotel because ours was the only hotel left with a kitchen operating and electricity. And so I'm talking to different people in the lobby, and then I hear somebody speaking American English on the far side of the lobby. I walked over there, and I went to introduce myself, and I said, "How are you? My name is Jimmy." He said, "You're Jimmy Moriarty. Your wife's Joanne. I'm here to save your life." And Walter's a little bitty guy. He's about 5'6", 78 years old, big smile, And so he actually tried to go with us, and he was held hostage by a criminal named Reverend P.K. Paul or something that was trying to get money from releasing Walter. But Walter's a real nice guy, and we still stay in touch with him, and he is exiled outside the United States because, again, he was trying to help Libya. And so the government here has an arrest warrant out for him.
Yeah, they put a story out that Walter Fontroy was killed in Libya, and he wasn't. That was a lie. He met 2 guys that were probably CIA in the workout room in the Rexus.
Or Blackwater or something.
Yeah, they were something. In the workout room at the Rexus. He told us the story. He said, I would go down there and talk to them because they were Americans, and I enjoyed talking to them. And he said, they told me one day, we were sent here to kill you. But we like you. You're a good man. We're not going to kill you. But the story went out that he was dead already, because when we got back, Walter wasn't back yet, and I called his family, and I said, he's alive. And they were so happy because they didn't know. But, This is just the way these things are managed. I guess everything is managed. It's not just, we just had a war and everything just happened. No, there's things that are managed. But
anyhow, we got into Benghazi. We were taken to this hotel, and we still had to get out of Benghazi. We had to get out of Libya. We're farther away by 1,600 kilometers than we were before, And so when we got there, we're in the hotel in the Tbilisi. We knew that there was a U.S. office in that hotel. There was also a European Union office in that hotel. So Joanne and I went up to the U.S. office. It was like a consulate, if you would, and we went up there to see if we could get assistance from the U.S. to get out of there. The guy barely even spoke English. He said, "I'm not here to help any Americans. I'm only here to help the rebels. We're here on a humanitarian effort to help the rebels. I can't help you." And I said, "But we're U.S. citizens. We have no money. We've been captured by Al-Qaeda where they're trying to kill us. We need help to get out of the country. I can't help you." So we went downstairs and went to the European Union office. That guy was very nice, very polite. He said, "I wish I could help you, but you have nothing to do with the European Union, therefore I can't help you." By the time we got back downstairs to the lobby, the concierge recognized us as not being typical bearded radical Islamist fanatics, and so he called the number 3 man with the National Transitional Council, which is the phony government the United States installed during this false flag operation. He was there in Benghazi. He was the ranking guy left there. And so an hour or so later, his head of security came over. Didn't speak any English at all, but he spoke to the prince. He was very, very impressed with the Bahraini prince. He spoke to Fatima too, but she didn't want anybody to know who she was because her political position would have guaranteed her being auctioned off to the highest bidder, And but the prince introduced all of us and said we needed help. And so his boss came, and the man was perfectly dressed, suit, tie, and everything, spoke perfect English. And he talked to us. And he said, I understand the ordeal you all have been through, and he said, I want to help you. We didn't tell him that we had been captured by Al-Qaeda, but we told him we were trying to get out of Libya. We had been in a fact-finding commission. And fortunately, the line of communication between Tripoli and Benghazi had broken down, and so there was no report of us being out of Tripoli yet. So he said, this was still Ramadan. He said, I'm going to invite you to eat. He said, how long has it been since you've eaten? We said, 5 days. And he said, well, I'm going to invite you to break fast in the lobby, in the restaurant, in the hotel. They have a big buffet. And he said, then I'm going to have my security man stay with you, and I'm going to see if he can't get you on the flight. There's a humanitarian flight leaving tonight, taking wounded soldiers to Tunisia. And he said, it's very crowded, but he said, I'm going to see if we can't get you seats on that plane. And he said, I'm going to leave my security man with you and take you through that. That was the third miracle. We did have dinner that night. His security man took us to the airport, put us in the front of the line, got our boarding passes for us, took us to the executive lounge at the airport, which was apart from all the rest of the airport. It was like an executive lounge. And we were there for hours awaiting the departure of the plane, and other politicians came in, other members of the NTC came in. We were talking with them. One of them had been with the World Bank for years, and one of them in something else.
The airport wasn't open.
Yeah.
It was completely dark. All they had was one plane, I think, that was coming in and going out. So they had to wait for that plane to come in. And when that plane landed, it was about 2:30 in the morning. We just walked out onto the tarmac, completely black, no lights at all. We got on the plane, and the guy just took off.
And there was, I can tell you, the plane wasn't full, and there were not any wounded soldiers.
But he did say, he said, I'm going to fly low because he said, I don't want to be seen. He said, we could get shot down. So that was very,
and
very.
This was a raggedy-ass old plane. It was a 727, and when you looked down at the floorboard between your feet, you could see daylight.
No.
Not really, but, you know, doors were missing.
Were broken and missing,
and it rattled and rolled. I mean, it was, I don't know. The plane was old when Hitler was a private, you know. It was in terrible shape. And
we got into Tunis at 4:30 in the morning.
And some guys up in front, they looked real buff. They were military looking guys, and the prince that was with us,
they were in military uniform.
He said they're Qatar, middle level. He said they're majors. They're not high ranking. He said you can tell because I can tell their accent. They're not educated outside of Qatar, out of Qatar. But he said they're military. And so when we got to Tunisia, plane landed, and of course we all get off, and these guys were the last ones to try to reclaim their luggage, and they were carrying with them some metal frames that had great big dollies, wheels on them. They were metal frame with a great metal bottom in them. They were about 24 inches by maybe 14, 16 inches, and they set them down next to the conveyor belt. When the conveyor belt came along, the first box that came out was a metal reinforced box. It's all metal sides. It took 4 of them to lift it up, put it over on this dolly. The second one that came along had a hole in the side of it, and when they lifted it up, they were trying to move it real fast, and it kind of tipped over a little bit, and some gold buttons fell out. And they real quick shoved them back in that, and they rolled this stuff out. So what they had done is they took a bunch of the Libyan gold, melted it down to get rid of the hallmark, and that was their bounty they were taking with them. And we saw that with our own eyes. And so when we finally got on the ground, Fatima too had some friends there in Tunisia, and so she called one of them. We went to a small hotel, and of course nobody was available at the U.S. Embassy. It was early in the morning by that time. And as soon as it was daylight, we were allowed to get on the Internet at that hotel, and we called and finally got through to a U.S. Officer in Washington, D.C. that was acting on behalf of that office. And he said, well, the only thing they could do, since we had no money, they could contact several of our family members, and they could have our family members send them money, send the government money, and then the government
would manage that.
They would manage the money for us and get tickets for us whenever they could to get back to the United States. And I said, well, we don't have money for cab fare anymore. The money I spent buying the freedom from all of us, that was for all 7 people, but nobody had any money, And
we didn't have any credit cards or anything.
They took all our credit cards and everything. And so he said, well, we can put you in this hotel, this Ramada Hotel. And the Ramada Hotel was a $70 cab fare from where we were, which meant $70 there and $70 back to the airport. Where we were was about a $3 ride to the airport. And I told the guy, I said, we don't have any money for that. And he said, don't plan on getting any tickets anytime soon, because it was the end of Ramadan. It was the end of August. It was the end of bank holiday in Europe. And so all the flights were full. And he said, I did get a man out of Tunisia today to Houston, one-way ticket, $3,900. And so I said, well, what's the process? And he said, you give us your passports, and then we give you a temporary passport, gives you one trip back in the United States, and then you have to repay all the money before you can get another passport. And so we didn't like the sound of any of that. So Joanne's daughter actually got us a couple of tickets early the next morning to go into Rome. We had plenty of miles on British Airways that could get us back to the United States. And fortunately, after the first 2 hours of confrontation with British Airways in Italy, they finally understood who we were and what we'd been through, and they were so gracious. They got us on a flight that day. They made hotel reservations, gave us meal coupons for dinner and breakfast the next morning, and put us in business class accommodations on the flight, using our miles, of course, but very, very nice people. And, everybody was so gracious to us. The only one that wasn't gracious to us, our own government.
But
exactly.
That's not even half the story, because we thought we were finishing, but we weren't. We were just getting started.
Yeah.
We got back to Houston. Jimmy was taken. We went through passport control. He was taken. I wasn't. I'm the one with all the information. And I went down and sat 3 hours in the baggage section waiting for him. He was taken by the FBI, or whoever it was. I think it was the FBI, and interrogated for 3 hours. They tore his luggage apart. They had 3 computers.
Took the lining out of it. They had 3 screens. One guy was asking me the questions, but he was getting the questions off of 3 screens in front of him. And they were really interested to find out who paid our way. Well, we paid our own way. We spent that trip, that fact-finding commission cost us about $100,000. And, of course, the last nearly $20,000 was what saved our lives, Not really God saved our lives, but questions about what we were doing, why we were there, what relationship did we have with the politicians? We didn't have any of that. 3 hours of questions. Finally, they let me go, but they said, be prepared to have us at your home in the very near future. No problem. Up until that time, we still...
It doesn't stop there either. And folks, I'm going to tell you, we could spend days with James and Joanne talking about this. This is a fascinating story. I didn't mean to interrupt here, but we're getting close to the top of the hour. I just want to kind of recap here. This is the story of James and Joanne Moriarty, who are business people, going in and out of Libya on business, and were there pre-NATO, pre-Arab Spring, pre-NATO /US /Mossad /MI6, whatever.
January 1st, 2007.
Yeah, I mean, and then you were there during the attack, basically, the takedown of Libya, the takedown of Gaddafi, this incursion by these rebels, or terrorists, I should say, that were really brought in by our State Department with the complicity of other governments, correct? I mean, and you barely escaped with your lives. Okay. I mean, this is the inside story. But see, in the next hour, because I do know some of the story, it doesn't end there, because even today, folks, these two fine people are really suffering suffering from the government, our government.
Yeah, the blowback.
Yeah, thank you, Joe. The blowback. And folks, if you go to their website, Libyan War the Truth, Libyan War the Truth, you don't have to put the in there. LibyanWarTheTruth.com. You can purchase their DVD, which has got a lot of information on it. It's their live presentation of their story. There's a PowerPoint presentation with photos. It's over 3 hours long, and it's really the story of what they went through. They provide proof, photos, videos of weapons supplied by NATO or supplied to NATO Al-Qaeda mercenaries via Qatar. The weapons basically stamped, made in the USA or made in the UK. So all of this stuff.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the DVD. It's $15 plus $5, and you can get that $5 shipping. And you can get that at LibyanWarTheTruth.com. That's LibyanWarTheTruth.com. We're going to go take our top of the hour break. We'll be right back after these short messages. You're listening to Jim and Joanne Moriarty on the Hagmann Hagmann Report on this Monday, June 8th, as I said. We'll be right back after these short messages from our sponsors. Into our third and final hour on this Monday, June 8th, 2015. Our guests tonight are Jim and Joanne Moriarty. Their website is LibyanWarTheTruth.com. Bookmark their site. And also, if you want to grab their DVD...
I'm going to order that today.
Yeah, we were just talking about that during the break, how we were going to order that. But go to their website, LibyanWarTheTruth.com. $15 DVD, only $5 shipping and handling. And this is something that the government never wanted nor intended for people to hear, is their firsthand account of escaping Libya after the U.S. NATO-backed strikes on Libya. Guys, you guys came back here, as I said, you said they never intended you or wanted you back here to tell your story. And really, through the miracles of God and the connections you made, you were able to find your way back home. What's happened to you since you got home? How has this government acted towards you?
Oh, man. Well, let me tell you, first of all, we were so naive. We thought that we, as citizens of the United States and the United States government, were both fighting the same enemy, Al-Qaeda. And we were sure wrong about that. When we got back, we had lost $200 million in Libya. Everything that we had taken 15 years in building up our business was all lost. And so we were basically barefooted, and we had a bunch of great scientists and people that worked for us. We sold everything we had and gave them all a nice stipend because, as I said, we're good business people and we have great product. We would start over again, so we tried all our contacts, couldn't get anybody to agree to do business with us. I went out, tried to find a job. Joanne and I were sending out 20 resumes a day for me, 30 a day for her, never got an interview. And then finally got some interviews, got 3 job offers, and then the job offers were pulled. Still didn't know why that was. I just thought we were too old and fat,
Also, during this time, the Libyans were contacting us, but a lot of them were now in exile. Over 2 million of them left. And they were trying to give us information that what was going on in their country. They thought the United States, if they knew that Al-Qaeda was doing things in Libya, that the United States would come clean it up. We thought that too, foolish of us. Well,
we kept thinking we'd find an honest politician.
Yeah.
And if they understood how wrong-footed we were in Libya, that they would stop it. They'd see that we'd stop supporting Al-Qaeda and Muslim Brotherhood. We kept believing that there were some good people we could find.
I had constant, active, current intelligence on the ground all the time from the tribes of Libya. And I called every congressman you can imagine, every senator you can imagine. The only person that I really got, some of them talked to me, some of them said they'd get back to me, but they never do. Tara Dahl, who was the aide to Michelle Bachmann, is the only person who ever got back to me, and she was very interested in the story. She also said that if I had been captured by Al-Qaeda, that I needed to was I debriefed? I said no, and she said you have to be debriefed. So this is how we started in our intelligence area. She put me in touch with a young man who works for the FBI Terrorist Task Force, and
what's his name?
His name is Tim Hunt, and he is out in Oakland, and he's
on loan to the FBI Anti-Terrorist Task Force International, and he's a
police detective. But he said he'd been all over the world, and he said if you were captured by Al-Qaeda, you have to be debriefed. He wanted a lot of my information, which I gave him. And he said, I'm going to contact the DIA. The DIA, the Defense Intelligence Agency, is going to need to speak to you. So I said, all right. He said, it'll probably take 2 or 3 weeks before they get back to you. Well, they were back to me. He called back. He said, I already contacted them. In 2 days, they called me and said, they'll have a man there tomorrow. So we had an agent from the DIA show up at our house, and this
claiming to be,
he said his name was Kevin Davis, and he was there to debrief us. And the more he learned about us, the more he came back. He came back a number of times. He spoke to the tribes on Skype. He got a lot of intelligence. They gave us a test because they didn't believe that anybody could be friends with the tribes of Libya. They said in all their history of intelligence, nobody's ever been able to get inside the tribes of any country. So they gave us a test of 14 questions, and the tribes, Sheikh Ali had all the tribes come together, and they did it in 24 hours, answered all the questions.
We were giving them intelligence about where Al-Qaeda leaders spent the night, where their underground storage of weapons was, where they were transporting, where their training center was, where they had 70 tanks, and how many armored vehicles they had at this location, giving them latitude and longitude. We would have them on our computer in our home, hooked up to one of the Libyan tribal leaders in Libya, and they were giving them on a Google map exact locations. Now, this was actionable intelligence. They couldn't get it from anybody.
They also, if you go back, roll it back to 2012, we were told 6 weeks before the attack on the safe house that Chris Stevens was in when he was killed. We were told that was going to happen by some people that were deep in the desert with Al-Qaeda, and they called some of the tribes, and they said that they need to understand there's going to be an attack on American property. Do you understand what we're saying? There's going to be an attack in other countries, too. I tried 100 times to tell somebody in Washington, D.C. I have this information.
Joanne's dialing finger is 1 digit shorter than it used to be.
But if you're not in the club, you're not in the club. I mean, the gatekeepers are do a good job. You're out.
She called everybody, and she learned how to get through the gatekeeper, and she'd get into their security department, military security. Oh, yeah, we're going to get back to you. We're going to set up a direct link with the tribal leaders.
We had one military representative. I think Peter King was the guy. I'm having a memory about him. His military guy, when I started telling him what I knew, he said, what do you want me to do with that? And I said, well, I didn't even finish. He said, why would you have that information? Who are you? And he hung up on me.
Oh,
that
wow.
was the end of that conversation.
And
he got angry.
Okay. Let me stop you right there. What was you knew about the attack in Benghazi 6 weeks before it took place on September 11th, 2012. What was the ostensible motive, according to the information you received? Go ahead.
Beforehand, we were told.
It was because of al-Libi's brother that was bombed in Afghanistan. We were told it was retribution. That was one of the reasons that we were given. They said there's an anniversary date or there's something that they're not happy about and they're going to have retribution. But there's a whole lot more to that story, a whole lot more than that.
See,
sure.
They're getting the tribes had a spy, if you would, inside every Al-Qaeda cell, inside every Muslim Brotherhood cell. They were on the ground because they're trying to get their country back.
Still are.
And they still are. So they would feed information to us through their tribal leaders that were in exile in Egypt, and some of them were in Tunisia. And we're getting this information. And like one time, the DIA, this guy whose real name turned out to be Eric Maddox. Can you imagine somebody coming into our home and we're trying to give them intelligence, and this sorry piece of garbage is giving us a phony name? That's what they did to us. Yeah. I mean, I'm pissed about that. But anyhow, he's in there, and we're telling him that here's the main training centers for these guys. And this center is their biggest training center. We gave them latitude and longitude. Nobody knows about it. It's got 4,000 Al-Qaeda in there being trained. They've got all kinds of weapons and everything. We give it to them. The first time that information had ever gone any place outside of Al-Qaeda was when the tribal leaders gave it to us. We gave it to the DIA. 3 or 4 days later, they had an emergency evacuation of that location, and they were told to leave with what you can carry, sell whatever extra weapons you've got, get the hell out of Dodge, and they traversed all the way across Libya and went out through Algeria. And one of the generals who was masquerading as a rebel was giving us blow-by-blow directions of what cars they were in, how they were going out of the country. Nothing was ever done. And so we asked this Eric, we said, what in the hell are you doing with this information, And he said, well, quite frankly, it goes up the top and is blocked. Another time he told us that the agenda, this is coming from Defense Intelligence Agency, their top interrogator. He said agenda in the United States is being set by Muslim Brotherhood. Quote me on that. That's what he said.
He also said that the translators for the intelligence services are mostly Muslim Brotherhood.
Okay. Now, Jim, say that one more time, and Joanne, say that one more time. Please, this is important, folks. Listen to what they're saying.
The reason he said this was because I said, Muslim Brotherhood are just as bad as Al-Qaeda. He said, well, I don't know. He said, most of our translators in the DIA and CIA and stuff are Muslim Brotherhood. He said, I think they're pretty nice guys. That's exactly what he said. And
he said that agenda in the United States is being set by Muslim Brotherhood.
Folks, did you hear that? We've been telling you this.
If you want to verify that further, call Congressman Pete Sessions. He's the 5th most powerful guy in D.C. He's head of the Rules Committee for Congress. And after we had a long private session with him, he called the head of Defense Intelligence Agency into his office to verify everything we said. He verified everything we've ever said, 100% accurate. And not only that, but the DIA also told him that all the intelligence we provided was 100% accurate. And he said, the DIA said, we don't know how 2 people sitting in the Woodlands, Texas, can pick up their phone and call any place in Libya and get absolutely accurate information anytime. And Pete Sessions says, then why did you not make these 2 people your best friend instead of attacking them? And, of course, he had no answer for that. But we had confirmed us. We had been blacklisted, and the soft kill began when we came back into the airport in Houston.
Let me tell you the rest of that story. After the DIA, Eric Maddox was there with us for quite a while. He came a number of times. He then brought in.
We told him if he couldn't do anything, we weren't giving him anything.
Because the tribe said, the information we're giving you, he said they pay huge amounts of money in Egypt for this information. He said there's CIA people, there's agents, Blackwater agents, stuff on the street that offer $50,000, $100,000 for the information we're giving you. We want you to get that money. Well,
now, here's why. Let me back up a minute. We used to have 3 houses. We sold all of them. We gave stipend to all our 30 scientists and engineers. We sold my car collection, sold Joanne's belief. We sold all our jewelry, our gold. We sold everything because, tomorrow we would start our business up again. It's that good a business. We didn't realize we were being soft-killed. We couldn't get anybody to talk to us. So we're liquidating everything, and we sold both of the extra cars we had, et cetera. So, when we're down to nothing,
the Libyan
we're
tribe,
scrambling.
They wanted to help us. They felt it somewhat responsible for our situation. We told them it wasn't their fault at all, but they're very, very nice people. Anyway, they said they need to pay you for this information. And, of course, the guy from the DIA, we never pay for information. I don't know where you heard that. Well, they do pay for information. They do it all the time. So he brought an FBI guy in because he said this guy does wet work. He said maybe he can take some action in Libya. Well, that guy was worthless. Said he'd give us a phone number. He never did. We never heard from him again. But we did hear from Tara Dahl again, who said that Glenn Beck would like to make a documentary of our story, a 2-hour documentary, and the head of his group production company, The Blaze, would like that. What was his name?
Weasel.
Yeah, Joe Weasel would like to come and interview you. And we said fine. And so he called. He said they were going to bring 3 from the Blaze and 1 extra one. He said, we need to bring some security for you because he said, you realize you're in more trouble from this government than you were when you were in Libya. So he brought in a lady that he said was security. Turns out she was CIA.
Her name, the name she gave us, was Nikki Baracol.
So this is Glenn Beck's organization bringing in the CIA to our house. We told them our story. I didn't give them all my documents. Yeah, they sat with us for 6.5 hours. This Nikki Baracol said, I've interrogated a lot of people. Your story's 100% correct. I can tell you went through this. She said, nobody gets out alive from Al-Qaeda. She said, I'm shocked. And the other people who came to our house said that
too.
The
Defense Intelligence Agency, 2 times he said, you all need to be written up in the Guinness records because nobody gets out of Al-Qaeda's hands alive. And then another time he made the comment and said, you all weren't supposed to get out of North Africa.
Anyway.
Now, whether that was a slip of the tongue or what they planned to do to us, I don't know. But
when
look at the source.
Let me stop you right here because you made a statement here about CIA agent or operative. There's a difference, but we'll just
asset. Yeah.
Okay, asset. Yeah. Okay, being part of the Glenn Beck crew, was this intentional? I mean, was this for your benefit?
Oh, yeah.
Was this?
He said, I'm going to bring a woman or a person, he said, in security from here. He was in D.C. or New York. He said, with me when we come because you need some security. I said,
okay.
Fine with us. Now,
let me back up and help you answer that question a little more. Dr. Jerome Corsi has written about 40 articles based on the information we've given him. 3 of the documents we've been provided from the Libyan tribal leaders have been read into the congressional record. There are 18 Muslim Brotherhood executives or top guys in prison in Egypt now, sentenced to death as traitors because they were paid by the U.S. government through the embassy in Cairo amounts of $450,000 to $850,000 each. That document was delivered to us. We gave it to Dr. Corsi. It was read into the congressional record along with other documents. When we told Dr. Corsi that the Blaze was coming in to do a 2-hour documentary, he said, be very careful. Glenn Beck has been compromised. Now, that came from Dr. Corsi. We respect him.
Okay. And Jim and Joanne and folks, let me just say this. This fits with our conversation. Joe and I had a conversation with Dr. Jerome Corsi in Orlando this couple of months ago at the Prophecy in the News conference there, and I did not at the time, and we did not know Dr. Corsi was making reference to you folks. This does fit. It's consistent with the information we received from Dr. Corsi back in February. So now the picture is becoming much clearer. Thank you so much for that explanation. Okay, go ahead.
Sure. Well, when they came and they sat and listened to our story, they were very excited. They said, Glenn is probably going to want you on his program at least twice. It'll be a 2-hour documentary. We'll be back in 3 days with our film crew.
And what they were trying to get was 300 gigabytes of information. Joanne picked 25 gigabytes of stuff that was not so earth-shattering and gave that to them. And they said, is this all you got? Well, this is all you're getting now. So they came there, I think, really to find out just how much damning information we had. Every
intelligence person that came into our home or talked to us on the phone wanted all of our information.
And we had 4 total in our home.
Now, at
our invitation.
There's 4 videos. I have 4 interviews or 3 interviews that are deadly to the cabal, if you will, to whoever started the war in Libya, because they're eyewitnesses to how it was started. And nobody has those except us. So I never give those out to anybody. But anyway, needless to say, Glenn Beck's organization left. That Nikki Baracol said to me, put her arm around me. She said, you can count on me as your sister. I will set you up private emails. You can talk to me anytime you need help. She went on and on. Anyways, they left, and I didn't hear from them again when they were supposed to arrive.
They were supposed to be back Thursday morning with film crew.
They did not come, so I called Joe Weedle. I have his private number. He did not answer the phone. Instead, I got a call from Nikki Baracol, and she said, I have to tell you, I have canceled this project. So the CIA canceled the Glenn Beck project, I guess. She said, the reason is this is sensitive information, very sensitive, and you're talking to intelligence agencies, and I want you to continue that.
She said you need to continue doing that.
Yes, and she said, but as far as everything else goes, you need to forget about Libya.
And you need to start your life over today.
If you want to have a life.
And I said, wait a minute, that sounds like a threat. She raised her voice. She said, you stand down and do exactly what I'm telling you or you won't have a life.
Wow.
At that point, when we hung up with her, I said, Joanne, we've got to start going public because we're on the wrong side of this deal. And we did. That was 2 years ago last month. And we've been on, I don't know, a couple hundred hours of radio, maybe more than that. We've given seminars everywhere from Houston all the way to Northern California and back.
Yeah, we don't have a home right now. We're living in a little lake house from somebody who was generous enough. They don't use it and let us live here.
But they've destroyed us. They killed all our bank accounts. They killed our business.
The first time we made our CD, it came in and we didn't realize this, but it arrived early. We'd never sent out or made CDs before. And when we opened it and played it, it was full of hardcore pornography. It had our cover on it, but hardcore pornography inside. We later learned from some people in Dallas that there were 2 people in their group that had felonies for that because usually the FBI shows up right behind them, and if you have more than one copy of pornography, that's intent to distribute, and that's a felony. So what happened with this, God was on our side again. It came from Taiwan. It was delivered early, so they were a week behind. So we were able to destroy that, which we did, and get some different copies from a different source. Yeah,
we talked to a gal that was a detective in California, and I said, what do I do these? Do we take them to the police department? We're so stupid. We're so stupid. We believe that our government and everybody involved in it is good folks. She said, don't you do that. She said, if you take it to the police department, they will not destroy it. That'll come back and hound you from now on. She said, you get rid of it. And I said, well, should I take it to one of these companies that just destroys it? She said, if you do, you make sure you see them destroy it. Otherwise, it'll come back and bite you. So no money, and we had to go out and buy a machine to grind up those 1,000 those CDs. So, God has protected us all you can't imagine. I mean, they're frustrated because every nasty trick they do to us gets foiled. We've given seminars at John Birch Society, a bunch of them, and the people are really, they receive us very well. We did one in Houston, and downtown Houston, and that day happened to be Jim Drury's 80th birthday, and we invited him to go out and have cake with him on his birthday, and then we had some folks that we had never met before, but they invited us to dinner at Lake Conroe. So we had a few hours to kill, and the car needed to have the oil changed, so we went to Walmart and had the oil changed and tires rotated, and then went and met Jim, and then we went to dinner, and then we left to Jim Drury, is the Virginian, the cowboy actor. Right. And so anyhow, we were leaving Lake Conroe, going back towards deep southeast Texas, and as soon as we got on Highway 105, the radar detector started going off. And I could see in the rearview mirror there were 2 police cars. There were 2 Texas highway patrollers behind us. And then after about 10 or 15 miles, those 2 pulled off and 2 more pulled on, and the radar detector came on again. And this went on for over an hour. Joanne said, do you think they put that radar gun on our rear bumper? Because, this just doesn't happen. We got about 70 miles outside of Houston, and they turned the red light on and pulled us over. And the guy said, it
was dark. It was about 11 at night.
He said, I want to go through your car. He said, you can give me permission to do that? And I said, I don't guess so. And he said, well, then you all step out of the car. I'm going to take the drug dog around here, and if the dog marks for drugs, you're under arrest, and we'll tear your car apart until we find them. Well, believe me, with all the trouble we've been in with the government, we don't speed, we don't drink, we don't never have done any drugs, but none of that would happen. So he puts us on the opposite side of the bar ditch, about 50 feet apart, and brings his dog out, and the dog goes around the car 3 or 4 times and never marks anything. Then the policeman the highway patrol goes to the back window of the Sequoia, and he starts tapping on the left side of the back window, and he tapped about 15 times. Finally, the dog jumped up there and hit his paw, and he said, he's marked for drugs, you're under arrest. And the whole time he's going through the car, and he frisked me, and they hands on my head and handcuffed me, and then he's got this cell phone in his ear. It's a flip phone, not a good phone, a cheap phone. He's got it in his ear the whole time. And so an hour They're going underneath the car on the driver's side, back by the rear tire. They're going underneath the car, looking in that part of the car. They're barely looking in the car. I had 2 toolboxes in there that if I was going to hide anything, that's a perfect place. They didn't look in those. The place where the jack is held in the Sequoia is a real good hiding place. They didn't go there. And after about an hour and a half, I kind of scooted over next to him. I said, "Can you hear what he's saying?" Because this guy, the Texas Highway Patroller, had this phone in his ear the whole time. She got down there, and she got back up, and she said, "He's saying I'm there. That's where I'm looking." So light comes on, and finally, after 2.5 hours,
I said, if you find anything in that car, you put it there.
That's what guilty people always say. And they were underneath that car 40 times each. There were 2 of them. Their uniforms were black from crawling underneath that car. And in the end, they didn't find anything and gave us a warning ticket for 67 and a 65.
So, but there have been drugs in this car. They told us that. There have been drugs in this car.
And so the only thing we can figure out, the guy that changed the oil at Walmart had tattoos on the back of his hands all the way up both arms. And I'm sure when he had that car up, changing the oil and rotating the tires, he probably saw something up underneath the frame. It probably had a great big red tag on it or something. It was taped to the frame, something. And he probably took it down and took it home with him. So you never know what angels look like. But they didn't find any drugs in the car that day.
That's a good point. Either that or somebody driving another Sequoia's got a whole bunch of drugs in their wheel well.
Yeah, but they were following our car. You know, another time, we're on a little dirt road at a small lake in deep southeast Texas. Our only neighbors are poisonous snakes and alligators. And we're on a dirt road for about 1.5 miles until we hit hard surface. And one day, 6 or so months later, after the drug deal, we pulled out on the hard surface, and 2 SUVs pulled up and stopped us. They put Joanne in one, me in another. We couldn't see out. The windows were blacked out. They drove for about 1.5 hours. We don't know where we went. We ended up going into a building with a parking garage underneath. We got an elevator, went up into some nondescript type of government offices, you know, with metal chairs and a metal table. And they proceeded to interrogate us for 33.5 hours and ask us the same questions over and over and over again. They told me and Joanne both that, you know, we can do this anytime we want. We can make you disappear. Nobody will ever know what happened to you. You know, you all need to shut up. You need to quit talking about what went on. You know, you all are in trouble. You don't have any help. Nobody's going to come to your aid. They kept threatening us the whole time and letting us know they could do this anytime. And we were told never drink anything that they give you. Don't eat anything. It may be spiked with whatever. Don't give them a chance to get any DNA. So don't touch anything they give you.
How long ago was this? I mean, I'm sorry to interrupt, but how long ago?
6 or 8 months ago.
Wow.
You know, I think that people ask me, you know, they say, well, why aren't you dead? If they want you dead, why don't they just kill you? I said, well, one of the reasons is I think we're an asset to them. They don't have any contact with any of the tribes. And if they could get us under their thumb, in other words, if they could get drugs on us, and then somebody shows up with a paper that says, sign here, you work for us, and we'll let you, this will all go away, that's something they would do in a heartbeat, I'm sure.
Or pornography, or drugs, or you're right, yeah.
Or whatever it is.
They're trying a lot, but let me tell you something else. Joanne and I are very, very comfortable that if we suffer an untimely demise tomorrow, we'd be in a better place. And that's a concept they don't understand. They're not spiritual people. They're not religious people. I don't think they believe in anything but money. And so for that reason, they can't understand why they can't scare us, because they threatened to kill us 4 times.
You know, but
another time they threatened us because we were putting out the names of Terradol. They were putting out the names of
well, Terradol was CIA. We learned later. But it's interesting because for them, being these high-end, we think of our intelligence guys like James Bond, you know. Believe me, the guys we talked to, the people we met, not on the top of the list. Trust me, I was shocked. I probably knew more about intelligence than they did, you know. And they tried to, I told them if they want me to give them intelligence in a certain way, train me, hire me, whatever, I'll do it. But no, they don't want it. We don't pay, we don't hire, we don't do this, we don't do that. So we gave out their names. We gave out Eric Maddox's name. Now, Eric Maddox is the guy who wrote Black Mission, a book about how he helped find Saddam Hussein.
Supposedly the top interrogator of the entire intelligence agency in the United States.
We knew him as Kevin Davis until we got a flyer in the mail from a Baptist church in the Woodlands that was having him as a speaker. We didn't know who he was. Jimmy looked at the flyer. He said, "Who is this guy?" I said, "That's Kevin." He said, "Yeah, but his real name's Eric Maddox." So we were given his name directly into our house. We went over and met him at the church when he was coming in, and I said, "I'm going to call you Kevrick from now on, Kevin Eric, because I don't know what your name is." But he said, "Are you following me?" I said, "No. But if you're going to be a spy, don't be famous, because it's real hard to, if you're famous, everybody knows who you are."
Now, this church, the name of this church is Crossroads Baptist Church. That year, it was a $33 million budget church, had $3 million excess, and our home in the Woodlands, we sold it to an investor at a good price with a condition that we would rent it for him at top market as long as he let us leave everything in there. And we'd already sold the other two houses, other two properties, and so we couldn't pay rent. We'd sold everything we could, and so we went to this church for help. They said, "Yes, men's ministry will help you. We will not only pay your rent, but we've got one of our parishioners is in the oil and gas service business. He's interested in your technology. We'll help you move into a less expensive place." All these things they were going to help, and we needed that help by the 1st. So a few days before the 1st, called back to find out what arrangements they needed or anything, and the guy that we were working with wasn't there. So the 3rd rolled around, and by now the CIA or whoever had contacted the leasing company that worked for the investor that bought the house, and they had noticed us that if we were late more than 3 days, they were having the sheriff come and evict us. Now, in Texas, you can't do that, but what are you going to do with the police with their guns out? So I went and sold some real rare antique automobile repair tools that you can't replace. I sold them for 10 cents on the dollar, paid the rent. Then Joanne and I, about the 6th of the month, we went back to church because they never would talk to us. We finally went in there late one afternoon, and there was a gal that was a volunteer receptionist that we'd met a few times before. And we asked her, are either of the pastors there? And she said, I feel so bad about this. We can't talk to you, I shouldn't even tell you this, but you all are such nice people. And, we were told that if we helped you all, that the church would be audited for 5 to 7 years, a full audit. It would cost us at least $500,000, maybe as much as $700,000. We don't know you that well. We can't afford that. So we can't talk to you and we can't help you. That was the big Baptist church called
we know the
Crossroads
government
Baptist
uses
Church.
the IRS. We know, everybody knows that now, It's one of their big hammer things.
But, we would like your audience to do a couple of things. Buy our CD, that would help us a bunch. But for sure, keep us in your prayers because God has been protecting us. We're alive because of His protection and His mercy. And, we're truth tellers, and we're out here on the end of a little tiny limb. And the things we say are so outlandish, but I can promise you we are the eyewitnesses that they want to disappear. And our story is dramatic, but it's the truth. A lot of the things
we've said now are coming out to be true. You're finding it in the news. Some of the news out now is confirming this. There's been some books written, one by Francis Boyle, that are absolutely true about what's going on. Libya still is upside down. It's a failed state. There are thousands of innocent Libyans held in prison. Thousands have been tortured to death. It's incredibly horrible what was done to that country. I mean, it's unbelievable what was done to that country.
And it's not ever going to be right because there's been so much depleted uranium munitions deposited in that country that nobody will ever be right. The incidence of real rare cancers are on such a rise there you can't imagine it,
They never had birth defects in that country. Now 25% birth defects. It's a real
25% that are fatal.
Yeah, it's a real criminal act what was done. It's beyond criminal. Beyond a criminal act. But what I was going to tell you back about our DVD, we put on it the names of all the people that we dealt with because we felt like if you're going to believe someone's story, you have to know the reality of the story. And so many people say, yeah, I talked to this intelligence guy, but I'm not allowed to give his name. That's easy to say. So we decided we weren't going to do that. And when this great intelligence community finally looked at our DVD last February, that was 8 months after we've been selling it, that's the first time they found it. So, I thought they'd see it right away, but they didn't. He said, well, we had a meeting with all of the intelligence agencies, and we've decided that you are some of the worst because you put names out there. I said, well, I'm not intelligence, am I? He said, well, you know what? For the first time in my life, I have to sleep with a gun. And I said, well, you hired on for that. I did not.
Wow.
I mean, he was real irate. He said, we just can't help you anymore. I said, how have you helped me?
Exactly.
How have you?
Yeah. Explain how you've helped us up to this day. Thank you very much. Oh, man.
Now, way back there, the Libyans, when the Libyans appointed us as their official spokesperson, the reason they did that is they prepared a letter to Obama.
This is right after Chris Stevens.
Right after Chris Stevens.
It was to the U.S. Congress, really.
And they said that if the United States would just stop supporting Al-Qaeda and Muslim Brotherhood in Libya, that the Libyan tribes would band together and clean Libya of all the radical Islamists, and then they would join hands with the other tribes of all the countries in the world and clear out all the radical Islamists worldwide. The only condition was that the U.S. stopped supporting Al-Qaeda and Muslim Brotherhood. And there was no response to that. So then they asked us if we would try to see if we could get somebody to acknowledge receipt of that. And that's when they gave us the personality as the official spokespersons. And we did try to present that document to everybody. Dr. Corsi got it. He published an article about it. Nobody in Congress ever wanted to hear about it. Second, in January of 2012 or 13, right after Chris Stevens was killed, the State Department of the United States offered a $10 million reward for information leading to the arrest of the people that coordinated the attack on the Benghazi safe house, if you would. The tribes had that information because the three men that were the leaders, their families were so ashamed of them that they gave their names, addresses, and phone numbers up to us. We offered to give that information, give it to the State Department, to Congress, to Trey Gowdy, to the what's the general's name that has the other investigation, the civilian investigation of Benghazi.
The Citizens Commission on Benghazi?
Yeah. We offered to give it to them. Claire Lopez.
Claire Lopez knows us.
We've offered to give it. Nobody has ever asked us for that information. Trey Gowdy, the two biggest fundraisers he has are members of the John Birch Society, and after they heard our story, they said, listen, Trey Gowdy's going to want to talk to you all. He's absolutely right on top of this. They said, and we're his biggest fundraiser, so we know he'll talk to us. So they said, we're going to call him. He will call you back himself. Well, a couple days later, they called us. Well, did you speak to Trey Gowdy? No. Didn't speak to his office. We called them. They didn't call us. They said, yes, we have a file on you. We know who you are. Never heard back from him. A week or so later, they said, well, have you met with him? No. No call back, nothing. They're shocked. They can't imagine it. Louis Gohmert here in Texas, big on trying to get the truth out. No information. Daryl Issa, nothing. All these people that are giving lip service to the U.S. public, acting like they're really trying to find the truth, they're not trying to find the truth. They're trying to hide what happened. And it's as bad. The Democrats, Republicans, they're just one and the other. They're the same. And the truth is not in them, and it's unfortunate because the people of the United States, our country, is disappearing. Our Constitution has been shredded. And listen, if it can happen to us, we were business people. We're very substantial business people, good God-fearing people, And look what's happened to us. Our government has attacked us because we are trying with the best effort we can to fight terrorism and help people.
Well, we were eyewitnesses, and my family said to me, because we're estranged pretty much from our families, well, why don't you just tell them that you won't say anything? I said, well, let's play the scenario out. I'm a mafia guy, and you see me shoot somebody and kill them, and I say to you, don't hurt me, because I promise I'll never tell anybody.
Right.
You're dead. There's no way they take that risk. No way.
Yeah. The only really, Joanne's got it right. The only reason we're alive is because they still, of course, monitor everything we say and do, and they hear all our conversations with the tribal leaders, and we talk to them every day. So they're getting intel through the back door. They know what the tribes are doing, and
we've learned to speak in code.
Yeah, it costs them nothing for that to happen. But we've always been people that if we're doing something wrong, throw us in jail and throw the key away. But if we're not doing anything wrong, then leave us alone. We're honest people. We're truth tellers, and the what's happened to us is unconscionable. But the thing is, we have our faith. We've got the best protector in the world working day and night to see that we're protected, and really that gives us so much comfort. But it's tough where we are.
There's power in knowledge, and the more people that have the knowledge of us, the more protected we are, really.
Right.
We really like to get our life back. That's what we really like.
Well, yeah, and you deserve to have your life back, and that's why, folks, I'm going to appeal to our vast audience in knowing James and Joanne and what they've been through, and having you folks having listened to their story. Please, Bob and Maggie sent an email. Thank you so much. Thank them, please, for us. Tell them that we're adding them to our prayers. Apparently, they're trying to send you some email. Their screen freezes, or there's if you've got to contact us form or whatever, it's freezing up now, perhaps because of the volume. I don't know. But folks, please, look, a DVD, certainly, any support. Get the word out. The higher profile. Okay.
I'll give them my email address on if they want to email me. Sometimes that site freezes up, and I'll be happy to give.
They killed it 2 or 3 times too.
It's AITrust, AITRUST @gmail.com.
Okay. All right. You're talking to a Christian audience. We are all in this together, and it just pains me to listen to your story, to know that you have this. I mean, it doesn't surprise me. It just hurts. It hurts, like knowing what's happened to this country. One question from several listeners: Where does Hillary Clinton fit into all of this? Not to make this political, but to make this, the who's who of things. Hillary Clinton, either one.
Hillary Clinton is bought and paid for by the cabal bankers.
But Hillary Clinton is she, John McCain, and a couple others, but especially Hillary Clinton, responsible for what happened to Libya. Yeah. She stood right out in front, knew what was happening, and supported it 100%. And she is responsible for bringing all that death and destruction to that country. As far as Chris Stevens is concerned, I would have to qualify this with my opinion, but from what I've been told from eyewitnesses, Stevens was dead long before there was smoke in the room, and it appears to have been an assassination, and that's my own personal opinion. Don't quote me on that.
Well, they can quote you, but we have some inside information about what happened. The man that was serving dinner to Chris Stevens and the Turkish ambassador that night in that home, in that building, that mansion, was one of the tribal members. And so he's serving, and when he's through serving, he leaves. But what he heard Chris Stevens asking for was the return of the 20,000 man-pad rockets that the United States had delivered to Al-Qaeda and Muslim Brotherhood weeks after the no-fly zone had been established. 20,000 shoulder-mounted rockets that are capable of knocking down a plane. Why did they do that? And there was enough pressure coming out. He tried to get them back, and he told the Turkish representative that the U.S. would pay handsomely for the return of those. And the Turkish ambassador told them they weren't going to do that. Well, that's going to be something that causes U.S. trouble in the future. But we think that's really the reason he was going to be the scapegoat on that in the first place. And back in March, in fact, you can go to Google. You can Google LibyanWarTheTruth.com. You'll see the kind of public relations work we were trying to do for Libya before we went in there on the fact-finding commission, because we knew the U.S. was wrong-footed. And in that meeting that was had, the Turkish ambassador left that after not having any resolution on the 20,000 rockets. He walked out the front door of that mansion, got in a fast car, was driven to the military airport, put on a military plane, and when the plane landed in Turkey, that's when these three leaders, by phone, started the attack on that compound. And we know the names, addresses, and phone numbers of the guys that were coordinating all that.
Morsi was involved. Morsi, the Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt, that
Right.
document was one that was brought forward from Libyan security to us, and that's another one Corsi did a big article on. Hillary Clinton and her husband are 30-year friends of Morsi. There's a long history there. Morsi was supposedly involved in training and organizing the attack on Chris Stevens. Now, Chris Stevens was a gun runner and a mercenary runner. Guns and mercenaries to Syria, guns into Libya, probably mercenaries into Libya too. He was CIA before he was an ambassador, and you won't find that anywhere on the internet now. They have removed that.
Redacted.
But
Right.
he was CIA. And so, the Libyans knew what he was doing. They knew it. They told me 100 times, please tell your people, or please tell your Dr. Corsi. They said, finally, they don't tell the American government anymore because they know they don't do anything. So they say, please tell Dr. Corsi they're running guns from Libya. They're training mercenaries in Libya and running them into Syria.
And the goal, the goal was all along and continues to be one of the goals, the primary goal is to topple Assad in Syria via gun running and training.
Sure. But that's an economic event too, because the pipeline and all the gas that's in Syria disrupts the Qatar gas flow into Europe. And Russia owns the pipeline, and they developed that gas field with Syria and the other pipelines. That would give Russia 60% control of all the natural gas sales into Europe. They can't allow that to happen.
Right.
So eliminate Syria, eliminate that pipeline. That takes Russia out of the scenario, and that allows Qatar, via floating bombs, to ship all their gas, and they've got huge amounts of gas, into Europe. And those LNG tankers are absolutely floating bombs. And but that's the way they would conduct it into Europe.
There's a real easy statement to say about Chris Stevens. Dead men tell no tales.
Yeah. But you can look at what Hillary Clinton did in South Africa and in Kuwait. And she was absolutely the instigator to cause the demise of Libya. And one of the Turkish companies that we were doing business with, his brother is an aide to the Turkish ambassador, and they were at a meeting in France, and they were talking about Libya. There was, I don't know if it was G8 or something. This was years ago, and they were talking about all the people that were being killed. And at that time, the numbers were 200,000 or 300,000, and they said, this is just too many deaths. This is just unacceptable. Population of 6 million. Look at all of them that killed. And Hillary Clinton smiled, and she kind of winked. She said, you have to bust a few eggs to make an omelet. And this young man said he was so shocked, and the ambassador was shaken too, because that was such a flippant statement to be made about 300,000 or 400,000 human lives.
The mantra of the cabal is, collateral damage, acceptable collateral damage. And anybody can fall into that category. Anybody.
We've only got about 2.5 minutes left. This is a question for both of you. I know this might sound trite, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Obama, Muslim Brotherhood, Muslim thoughts on Obama. Jim, you first, and then Joanne, you can follow it up.
Back when he was just running for president, when he was a candidate for the primary, the Libyans were so excited because finally there was going to be a Muslim in the White House. And he had been a big supporter, or Gaddafi had been a big supporter of Obama, had given him $50 million, had put $10 million into the race to put his uncle as president of Kenya. And they always said he was Muslim Brotherhood. And they said that unfortunately he had joined hands with the Karjites, but he was a Muslim, and they were real happy about that. It wasn't until he turned on them that they then began to change their thoughts about who he was. But everybody knew from 2006 forward that he was Muslim Brotherhood, and that absolutely was a Muslim, and it's within the rights of their religion to lie about who you are if it brings an advantage to the religion.
Okay. I'm in agreement with everything Jimmy said, plus the fact that when Egypt took their country back away from Morsi, when the 30 million Egyptians took to the street, if you look at some of the signs that they were holding in the street, Obama is, Muslim Brotherhood, Obama, they, in the Arab community, in the Muslim community, if you were, even in those countries where they're just all radicals, if you talk to any person on the street and you ask them, well, is Obama, who is he? Is he Muslim? Oh, yes, he's Muslim. He's Muslim Brotherhood. They all know this. It's common knowledge everywhere. I don't care, Libya, Tunisia, Egypt, Jordan, anywhere. It's common knowledge. We have friends across that whole swath of North Africa and the Middle East. And there's not one of them that if you ask that same question you just ask us, they'd say, well, don't you know? He's Muslim Brotherhood. We all know it.
Yeah.
Clinton's eight. Her parents are top in Muslim Brotherhood and the Women's Brotherhood as well. And, it's a real tough situation for us here in the United States because we just don't get the truth.
Absolutely.
Only shows like truth.
Well, Jim and Joanne, please, hopefully we can have you back. This has been a fascinating interview. I'll tell you, what a harrowing tale that you provided for us.
LibyanWarTheTruth.com is their website. That's LibyanWarTheTruth.com.
Oh, yeah, I can only...
We'll take your word for it.
Well, I just want to say thank you so very much, and God's hand of protection over you. Please, ladies and gentlemen, pray for these two fine people, and please come back on with us again. Let's keep in touch. Please let us know how you're doing. Check in with us, and I'll tell you something. Anything that goes sideways with you folks, you let us know, and we will air it right away.
Thank you. We also want to offer, we'll have one of the tribal leaders come on your show next time.
Sounds great. We'll have
Absolutely.
them. All right, we'll work that out. We're at the end of the show. God bless both of you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you folks, for having us on your show.
God bless. Folks, send them an email. Let them know how much you appreciate them. Please support their work. That's Libyan War for the Truth. Thank you, Joe.
LibyanWarTheTruth.com. Tomorrow, Stan Dale will be our guest. Until then, stay safe. God bless, and have a great night.